Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad that you all are with me. Whether you are on your way to work, whether you're at home, whether you are, just laying in bed, whatever you're doing, I'm glad that you're with me. I'm glad that this is going to be the voice in your ear. We are pushing very hard to get to 40,000 by Christmas. We are moving and we are going up, and I thank all of you for helping me do that and making this show what it is. This show runs from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, and we will do that for the foreseeable future. We will keep this boat running. We are still, regards to the historic election. And when I say historic, whatever you think of Donald Trump, it was indeed historic. This is what the map ended up looking like. That includes Michigan, Wisconsin. This was supposed to be the Blue Wall, Pennsylvania, where the Blue Wall crumbled. And in fact, that doesn't even talk about the gains that Donald Trump made in places like New York. He even won the popular vote, something that a Republican hasn't done, back since 2004 or something like that? What's wild about that also is Donald Trump made gains in pretty much every demographic. Now, when you're looking at the exit polls give you something that's super interesting. And I think it was Bill Clinton or one of those guys that used to say, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. In the exit polling, the people who experienced the most pain over the course of the Biden administration were the ones that ended up voting for Trump in much larger measures. So right here, this, for example. In the past year, inflation has caused your family severe hardship, moderate hardship, no hardship. 24% said no hardship. Of that 24%, 77% voted Kamala Harris. 22% said severe hardship. And of those people, 74% voted Trump. 53% said moderate hardship. And of that group, 51% voted Trump. The people who were damaged under the Biden-Harris economy turned around and voted for Trump, especially since Kamala Harris went around the country saying she couldn't think of anything she would have done differently or anything she would do differently. So you can see there's an economic context to this. And it goes further, right? When you are going into, for example, how do you feel about the country? And you get 70% saying they're either angry, right here. Feeling about the way things are going in the United States. Angry, dissatisfied. 72% of the people who said they were angry voted for Trump. 56% of the people who said they were dissatisfied voted for Trump. But understand, that is 73% of people who said they were either angry or dissatisfied. And those people turned around and voted for Trump. And again, I want to put this in the context of Harris saying she couldn't articulate what would be different, nor she could articulate what she would have done differently. So when you're looking at the election polling, there is a heavy financial element to this. Even when you get into incomes, like, or people who without a degree, meaning the Democratic Party, who was the party of unions and the party of working class, let's say going back to the 80s and maybe even the 90s before Bill Clinton got in, that party got taken to the woodshed by a blue-collar billionaire who the poor and the middle class believe was a better choice than the Democrat who they considered to be elitist. And even when you're looking at the exit polling results, you see people with college degrees were more likely to vote Democrats. People with high incomes were more likely to vote Democrats. It is amazing. Even when they're making this argument about Elon Musk and the billionaires, that Donald Trump is working with the billionaires. Donald Trump is working with billionaires. He's had a few. But Kamala Harris brought in over $1 billion in this race. Donald Trump only brought in apparently $300 let's say $400 million. He was massively outspent, and yet he pulls it out. And that just pulls out what can honestly be called a landslide. Harris and the Democratic Party is going to have to reconcile that. I don't know how they're going to reconcile that. I don't know what the Democratic Party becomes after this, but they're going to have to reconcile it somehow. And at the end of the day, whatever comes after, you would think, would have to be different enough and get the hint. Sanders pointed out that you can't be shocked that the Democratic Party lost, or that the working class didn't come out for the Democratic Party, considering the Democratic Party didn't come out for the working class. Basically, you abandon this group of voters. I mean, put it in context. She went running around the country with Liz Cheney of all people, as if this is a beacon of democracy. Outrageous. And you are shocked that you've demoralized your base. You ignored the Palestinian cause. You're shocked that the Arab community, or people with a conscience, felt some kind of way and didn't necessarily vote for you. Or for that matter, this kind of muddled campaign that gave you this kind of sense of Hillary Clinton, well, most of the time was spent attacking Donald Trump as opposed to articulating what you wanted to do in the office or your theory of the case. Also, piggybacking on this, a lot of the blame is also being deposited at Joe Biden's foot. Basically, you were supposed to be a transient president. You decided to run again. That doesn't look like transient to me. We have different ideas on the definition of transient, considering you tried to run again. And so, yeah, there's a fair bit of blame being thrown about. There's more blame being thrown about in the sense of the people who put a knife in Joe Biden. Because some people are making the argument that Joe Biden would have been a stronger candidate. Now, I don't know if that's true. Joe Biden was falling apart. He was getting beat horribly also. But they make the argument that all things being equal, Joe Biden should have been used, as opposed to Kamala Harris believing Joe Biden was an albatross around their throats. He should have been used as a weapon in certain countries or certain parts of the country, especially, let's say, in Pennsylvania, for example. Well, that didn't happen. She thought he was a liability. And, you know, at the point when Joe Biden comes out and calls half of the people garbage, well, you can imagine that sense of him being a liability kind of makes sense. By the same token, this is the map you're stuck with. And that just stuck with. One-term president. And if this is not a referendum on Biden and Harris, or for that matter, even the Democratic Party broadly, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. Liberals have been utterly and completely melting down. They have not been handling this all that well. They have not been handling this all that well. So, we have a little bit of time. I want to show one of my favorite videos. I have been laughing my ass off at this video like nobody's business, and I shouldn't be laughing at it. Like they say, you go to hell for laughing at stuff like this. Nevertheless, utterly and entirely hilarious. And I'm going to let you enjoy it with me.
Yep. I can't believe Trump's actually going to win this fucking thing. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm so pissed off. God damn it. I can't believe Trump's actually going to win this fucking thing. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm so pissed off. God damn it. How did we get here? How did we get here? What in the Alice in Wonderland nightmares is going on right now? All I can say is how fucking dare you? If you voted for that man, if you voted for anybody other than Kamala, and you live in one of the states that it was, close, or if you didn't vote, fuck you. chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I love you. How the fuck is this still happening? All I've ever known politically is hatred.
Oh, that is just hilarious. That is just utterly hilarious. They are not handling this all that well. They are not handling this all that well at all. Don't worry, Leigh. I'll be playing it again. It's utterly hilarious. We're gonna have Scottie and Garland joining us, and yeah, there's a lot of meltdown. There's a lot of recrimination. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of blame to go around. They seem to be shocked by the whole thing. They seem to be blown away by the whole thing. And again, as I keep pointing out, if they would have pulled up the map and just plotted down what goes where, they would have come to a certain assessment that it was hard for Harris to win it. I legit did not understand what they were looking at. Because when I went through the map, I was like, okay, she's probably going to get this. He's probably going to get this. He's probably going to get this. Really, the only question I had was Pennsylvania and Michigan. Everything else had been pretty consistent in regards to the battleground states. Nevertheless, they're losing their minds. They're flipping out. Kamala Harris has finally given her concession speech. She was gracious. I give her that. She was gracious. More gracious than I think Donald Trump would have been, thankfully. At the very least, she made this argument. I lost. He won. It's fair game. We're not going to stop fighting, etc., etc. Now, there's this other question about the Senate and the House of Representatives. Where do they go? Is Donald Trump going to have a supermajority? Meaning, is he going to get the House, Senate, presidency, and the Supreme Court? It's very possible they lost it all. It is very possible they lost it all. There's a question about this issue of the Democratic Party being fully and completely There we are. Guys, I don't know what went wrong. I got kicked out. But our guest is here. So I'm going to bring in our guest. We are joined with the one and only a good friend of the show, Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter is a former UN weapons inspector and weapons of mass destruction whistleblower. You can follow Scott on Telegram. And like I said, a friend of the show. Scott, how you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm doing good, thanks. My dog is decided to join the program this morning, but that's all right.
That is okay. 1 second. There we are. Okay. Sorry about that. I was fixing the audio. Getting rid of that. Yeah, I'm glad you could join me, Scott. Thank you for joining me, man. Before we get into anything, do you want to give me your thoughts about the election? And I don't typically get into electoral politics with you, but I am curious since it did just happen. If you have any thoughts about what seems to be somewhat of a mandate, give me your thoughts.
Well, it's not somewhat of a mandate. It's a sweeping mandate. It's a
Yeah.
decisive mandate. It's a mandate that is across the spectrum of American politics. He not just won the Electoral College, it appears he won the popular vote.
Mhm.
He has a majority in the Senate, and it appears that there will be a Republican majority in the House as well. We have a 7-2 court right now, a Supreme Court. It's going to remain a 7-2 court now that Trump is president. It will replace the two elderly conservative nominees. But that's it. That's not just the only thing that's happening here. We've witnessed the absolute destruction of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
The Republican Party has been destroyed for some time now. It's been replaced by what we're calling MAGA or MAHA. This isn't the Republican Party. It may have an R at the end of it, but what this is Make America Great Again. MAGA is now a political movement. It is a real political movement, and you can't deny it. It just won the presidency. It just won the Senate. It just won the House. America is a MAGA nation. And the Democrats don't have a counter for this. The establishment just collapsed in front of us. Who is going to run against J.D. Vance in 2028? There's the question. And there's no one that can. And J.D. Vance, whatever you think of him, is going to be polished over the course of the next 4 years. 4 years of revolution, I want to point out, too. Donald Trump came in 2016 not knowing anything about how to govern. And it showed. He surrounded himself with the most horrible people on the planet. He learned his lesson. I'm not saying that the people he's going to bring in this time are angels, but if he is half as smart as he claims to be, and as he appears to be, he's not a stupid man. He understands that he has a mandate for change. And he not just has a mandate for change, he has a personal incentive for change. The FBI went into his house. If you don't understand what that means, you've never had the FBI come into your house. I have. Without cause. Literally, there was no reason for the FBI to launch the raid that they did. It was purely a political move by the Democratic Party that was seeking to politicize the justice system. If you don't understand what's about to happen to the Department of Justice, to the FBI, you don't understand anything. And it's going to happen across the board. This will be a revolution in American governance. And there's nothing anybody can do to stop it.
Yeah.
That's what kind of mandate he just got. There's no breaks. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm saying what it is. This is going to happen. Get ready, America, because you're in for not 4 years, at least 12 years, because the Democratic Party is destroyed. It's done. The demographics have changed dramatically. Dramatically. And trust me, you want to watch the demographics change even more? Watch as this revolution goes on. Watch as the establishment is shaken to the core, even collapses. Watch what happens as people realize that Trump actually delivers. Imagine that, a politician who delivers on a promise. I'm not saying their life is going to be better. I'm not saying the economy is going to spring. The American economy doesn't operate under any fundamental rules to begin with. It's easily manipulated, and Trump will manipulate the economy to achieve just enough to appease the people. But there will be change, and for the first time in many people's lifetime, there will be fundamental change, and this will attract its own momentum. We are watching not an American revolution, but a Trump revolution that will become an American revolution. And this is a revolution that has a chance to go on not just for 12 years, but for 20 years. This could be a 20-year revolution because the Democratic Party isn't going to recover from what just happened.
Yeah.
I just want to remind the people what happened here. A coup d'etat. The Democrats seek to deny it. Joe Biden was supposed to be the nominee.
Yeah.
The entire processes that are normally associated with American electoral procedure were followed. Joe Biden became the declared nominee. His name was on the ballot. He debated as a presidential candidate. And then he was pulled out and replaced by somebody that didn't go through any of those processes. Had she wanted to be the president the normal way, she would have gone through, the normal primary process. But
Yeah.
she can't, because at that point in time, they would have realized that she can't be elected. She's unelectable. They should have known that from the 2020 campaign, where
Yeah.
she just collapsed. But here she is now, the candidate of the Democratic Party, and they're trying to say that they believe in democracy.
I know.
They don't.
I know.
And so the American people rejected it. And, yes, millions of people voted for, but that's the residual. The Democrats aren't going to get any stronger. They're just going to get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker they've been playing ethnic warfare in America for some time now, playing off the different ethnicities against the other. Again, I'm not here to sing the praises of Donald Trump. But what I am here to say is this movement that people called racist, that called Hitler, isn't. It's an American movement for all the flaws that are, engaged in that term. And you're going to see Americans of all colors, creeds, ethnicities starting to flock to it, because it is the only movement that offers change. And America's tired of the stifling establishment that's been strangling this country for so long. I'm not saying Trump has the answers.
Yeah.
There's going to be change, though. And sometimes change is enough. And I think that's what we're seeing here. This is a huge deal. And I don't think even the people who supported Trump, I don't think they quite understand what's about to happen.
Well, 72% of the population said they were either angry or dissatisfied. And of that group, the majority of those people went to Trump. And, Donald Trump, one of his first campaign speeches since winning, he said, we're going to stop these wars, that I'm going to end wars. I'm not necessarily going to start wars. Marco Rubio has called for the end of the Ukraine war. J.D. Vance has talked about ending the money going to Ukraine for a while now. What do you think the effect is on foreign policy in the U.S.? I mean, I would imagine Europe is going to be somewhat freaked out. But from the standpoint of Ukraine, Trump said he's going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. I don't buy that. But what is the effect that you think this is going to have on these wars?
Well, first of all, I think, again, part of this revolution is that we have to come up with a new lexicon because words that in terms that had meaning before, they don't have the same meaning because there's a different understanding. For instance, foreign policy. If you look at the exiting polls, it went from 3 to 5%. When people said, what's top on your mind? 3 to 5% foreign policy top on your mind. But how does that square with Trump saying, I'm going to shut down the Ukraine war? Because in the minds of many Americans, it's not about a war between Russia and Ukraine. They don't care. They don't care. They don't know. They don't understand. They don't comprehend. They have no knowledge of any of the multitude of factors that led to this conflict. All they know is that we sent over $100 billion there that needed to be spent here at home.
Yeah.
Now, and they don't want to engage into a debate about, where that money came from, and they don't want to talk about it being reinvested in defense industry. That's they don't care about foreign policy. What they care about is they look out and they see a country that's hurting, that needs investment here. Mm-hmm. And we sent $100 billion there and we got nothing from it. They see, if foreign policy doesn't, if you can't turn it into something that viscerally affects the American people, they don't care. The vast majority of them simply don't. They're not all, Georgetown School of Foreign Service graduates, who sit there and live, breathe, drink, eat, foreign policy and all this stuff. They care about the basic things: food on the table, gas in the car, heat in the house, roof over the head, job, vacation, family time. And they see $100 billion, and then they turn on the TV and they see disaster sweeping through North Carolina, and you get $750, recovery fee. They understand that. You see, they turn on the TV and they see roads swept away. They look out and they say, that's just like the road that's here. They see houses swept away. That's just like my home. They don't have any connectivity with what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And even in the Middle East, we have a little bit different there because we do have, a Jewish American community that's heavily involved in politics, and the um, Israeli factors large in American media, and so it's there. And there are people who say we care, but they don't understand the fundamental realities of that conflict. And
Right.
again, they're looking at money pouring out to Israel, and they ask the basic question: why can't we make it stop? See, it's not about right or wrong. In this case, they just want that war to end. They don't want American boys and girls going over there. So foreign policy has shifted away. Many Americans voted on foreign policy issues, but they didn't
Mhm.
call it that. They called it domestic issues.
Yeah.
Um, the entire foreign policy debate, has we've gotten into what can we say on Twitter? What can we say on X? What can we say on Facebook? Well, free speech is wrapped up in this foreign policy question, the
Yes, it is.
censorship and everything. But that's not. See, Americans don't say, well, that's a foreign policy issue. They say that's a free speech issue. This is about the government coming down on us, again, domestic. So I think in this election, even though the percentages of Americans who said foreign policy was important to them is a very small thing,
Yeah.
foreign policy was everywhere in everything we did, and most Americans didn't realize that.
Let me ask you, give me your take on, and like I said, don't typically get into a political space, but Trump just got elected. Liz Cheney running around with Kamala Harris. And, you were the UN weapons inspector, the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That was one of the big things. And the idea that Kamala Harris is using Liz Cheney or the Cheneys in general, or for that matter, George Bush, has been this kind of beacon of democracy. You even had Nicole Wallace coming out basically saying she wanted George Bush to come out to save the day, to hold back Trump. Like, what do you like? They seem to ignore the level of death and destruction, not to mention lying us into a war, not to mention spending $10 trillion, not to mention institute torture. I mean, they ignore all of this stuff and raise these people up as if they're statesmen. Give me a take on that. I mean, was that more counterproductive than it was beneficial to her campaign? Give me your thoughts.
Well, it's 100% counterproductive. If it was beneficial to the campaign, we'd be talking about President-elect Kamala Harris right now.
Right.
If Americans believed that Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, George W. Bush represented anything good, and you can call American people stupid, and many people do. In fact, a whole bunch of liberals right now are calling all the Trump people stupid. I can't believe you stupid people did this stupid act.
Yeah.
Vote that stupid man in. Really? We're not the ones that went out and embraced people who are the ideological opposites of what you claim to be and made common cause with the literal devil.
Yeah.
At a time when the people whose votes you're trying to win, I'm saying if I'm a Democrat, Kamala Harris,
Mhm.
you should at least study your enemy. Take time to study Trump. Don't see they just dismiss the Trump followers as these ignorant dupes, these Nazis, this garbage, etc., without understanding why many people would vote for Trump. And I will tell you that many of the votes that were cast for Trump were cast holding your nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people who voted for Trump weren't saying this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Had there been a viable alternative to Trump, they probably would have gone to that viable alternative, but they weren't going to go with the unelected, nominee who violates all democratic procedures, who's now making common cause with the team responsible for much of the problems that we have today. A team that got us involved in these endless wars in the Middle East that have cost so many thousands of American lives, so many millions of foreign lives. That did devastation to the American economy and the global economy. This shows you how much deficit of intellectualism existed in the Democratic Party to actually believe that embracing people who are the literal personification of evil and saying this is good. It's Orwellian in nature. Plus, again, I don't want to, I'm not here to, talk about was it a stolen election or not in 2020? What I can say is this: we all know that perception creates its own reality.
Right.
And when you go into the election booth, it's perceptions that's driving your vote. It ain't reality necessarily. It's what you perceive the reality to be. When you have so many people out there who believe that there was something fundamentally wrong with the with the 2020 election, and et cetera, you don't have to say, oh, they're right. You can say they're wrong.
Mhm.
But if you think embracing the face of Republican betrayal, of MAGA betrayal, because that's what Liz Cheney is. She betrayed everybody who was voting for Trump. That's the perception, that she
Yeah.
betrayed them, that she turned her back on the Constitution, that she went over to the dark side. If you're trying to win over enough people to win an election,
That ain't the way to do it.
why would you embrace this person? Why would you embrace this cause? She is poison, pure poison. But this shows you again the deficit of not just intellectual capacity, but of moral capacity amongst the Democrats. They stand for nothing. They stood for nothing. It was an empty vessel. And that's why the man that people had to hold their nose for got this sweeping mandate.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I totally agree with you. I want to move to Israel for a bit. So Yoav Gallant got fired. He was effectively dismissed. Israel Katz, the foreign minister, was made into the new defense minister. I want to play this clip, and I want to get your take on what Gallant is saying here, because he's given 3 points, and I want to give you a take on the points. Let's see this.
We get here. Three what issues. The first Wonderland nightmares is going on right now. All I can say is how
Wait a minute.
eligible to be drafted to the military must be drafted to the military. They must serve in the IDF and protect the state of Israel. Second topic, our moral obligation to return our sons and daughters, the hostages. The third topic, the need to implement learning from the mistakes of the war. I support a deep investigation into looking into who is responsible, and I call for a national commission of inquiry.
Now, he is effectively saying that he wants, and I guess the first question is this: is he asking for the ultra religious or the ultra nationalists, well, the ultra religious, ultra orthodox, to be added into the military because they have lost that many people? Or is he asking for this because of its political significance? Meaning, are the people in Israel looking at this saying, well, obviously, if we have to fight, they should have to fight too, meaning it's politically advantageous? Or is it, we have lost so many people in regards to southern Lebanon, in regards to Gaza, in regards to these wars, that all things being equal, we need as many people in the military as possible, including the ultra-Orthodox? What's true?
Well, let's be frank. Israel hasn't lost that many people, not from a traditional military standpoint. We lost more Marines going over to the beach in Iwo Jima than they've lost in this entire conflict. And we won the Battle of Iwo Jima, and we won the war. We won World War II in the Pacific, and we contributed heavily in the victory in Europe. It's not, but Israel's not designed to take these casualties. This isn't about the physical ability of the Israeli military to fight. It's about the mental capacity of Israel to continue the conflict. So this isn't about numbers. This is about politics. This is about, there's an existential struggle going on, in the hearts of many, of much of Israel. And this is about leveling that playing field, the domestic political playing field. Understand this, that what's going to defeat Israel and what is defeating Israel isn't about what's happening outside of its borders. It's about what's happening inside of its borders. Israel will collapse not because Hamas defeated it, not because Hezbollah defeated it, not because Iran defeated it. Israel will collapse because Israel lost the ability to continue as a viable nation state internally. And that's what we're seeing here. This is about internal politics. This is about shoring up internal politics, spreading the burden of sustaining statehood to a significant segment of the population, getting them to buy into this. Actually, from a military standpoint, I wouldn't want the conservatives fighting in my military because they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
They're not going to be the best soldiers. You're not going to be able to train them. They're not going to be effectively integrated. And the timetable it takes to train effective soldiers isn't going to be meaningfully, meaning that even when you bring them in, they're not going to have an impact. Israel needs the impact now. There are sufficient troops to fight this war. The problem is these troops don't want to fight this war. The desertion rate is sky high, 12 to 24% in certain units. We're starting to have Israeli soldiers commit suicide rather than go back to fight. You're seeing Israel collapse from within. So what Gallant is doing isn't about, making some sort of chess move to make, more Israelis available to the military. Yeah. This is an internal domestic political move to spread the burden of defending the state to all Israelis.
I see. Okay, I see. That makes sense. From your point of view, the last comment that he made, where he's called for a commission to investigate, and I think he says something to the effect of the causes of either October 7th or the causes of the war. Okay, that's pretty broad. What does he mean by that? Up to this point, they've effectively said Hamas was responsible for the war. Now, we know that there was Egyptian documents or information that came out effectively talking about the attack that was going to take place that the Netanyahu government fundamentally ignored. Is that what he means? Or is there something else that he's looking into in regards to what created or caused the war?
Well, I think what he's talking about is a commission similar to the commission that was created in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The last great intelligence failure on the part of Israel, where they were told the Egyptians were coming across the Suez Canal, yet they chose not to believe that because they had political considerations in mind. I think Gallant wants to investigate this because he understands that there's in 1973, the Israelis defined the problem as the conception. They had a conception problem that was intelligence driven, meaning that they didn't respect the intelligence that had been provided because they had a conception of the world the way they wanted it to be, and the intelligence didn't factor into that. The Netanyahu government had a conception of the world that it wanted to be. And part of that was that they had pacified or mollified Hamas, which they helped create, by the way, by opening up the gates for these work visas. So thousands of Palestinians could leave Gaza, come work in Israel, bring in income, bring it back. And the Netanyahu government believed that they had bought off Hamas, that they had bought off the Palestinians, that they didn't have to worry about that. So much so that, when they conceived about the potential of a conflict against all of Israel's enemies at once. I remind your audience that in 2022 and 2023, before October 7th, 2023, Israel ran major exercises, 2023 exercise called Operations Chariot of Fire, where they stress tested the Israeli military to say, what would happen if we had to go to war against everybody at once? Could we do it? And the answer was no. And that's something that Gallant wants to point out here. They knew they couldn't do this. And when they planned these total wars, they didn't plan a major action against Hamas. Hamas had been bought off. Hamas wasn't a problem. Hamas would be intifada. That's it, a handful of forces to contain the problem. Not a single time did the Israelis stress test their system by starting off with the notion that Hamas would attack them, draw them into a major conflict that would suck in 300,000 troops, the majority of their military resources, before they had to engage the other enemies. This was never conceived. And this is what Gallant's trying to get at, is that Netanyahu has gone down a path. He was responsible for the disaster of October 7th, not because he wanted it to happen, but because he had a fundamental cognitive problem similar to the one that existed in Israel in 1973 that has to be identified, called out by name, and resolved. And politically, he got Israel involved in a war that the Israelis knew they couldn't win. That's what Gallant is saying. You don't have a plan for victory because there is no plan for victory, because we know we can't win because we tested this twice recently. This is what Gallant is trying to say, is that Benjamin Netanyahu is responsible for the strategic defeat of Israel because he has put his own personal politics above the security of Israel.
Do you think there's a messianic level to this beyond this notion of staying out of jail? Because I agree with you. An element of this is I want to stay out of prison. But there seems to be a religious element to it also, where he thinks, I'm going to create this greater Israel, and I'm going to be remembered in the history books for being able to do this. And I guess to your point, this doesn't seem to be the most feasible thing in the world. They're being bogged down in southern Lebanon, they're still in Gaza, and Iran seems to have the ability to hit them in a way where they can't necessarily defend themselves. Is the entire plan just America? I mean, is that the thought, that America is going to come in, America is going to save the day, I'm going to get America, basically force America to get involved into this conflict? And is that going to be enough?
Well, it's always been Netanyahu's strategic objective, because he knows that Israel can't beat Iran without America. It just isn't going to happen. And so America must get involved. And so that's always been a part of this. But we understand this, that Netanyahu knew when he ran for this election the last time, that if he didn't win, he was going to jail for life.
Yeah.
Fact is, the only reason he ran for prime minister is the only way he could prevent himself from going to jail. And so once he became prime minister, again, I remind people that before October 7th, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets for weeks demonstrating against Benjamin Netanyahu because of what he was doing in terms of the changes in basic law to reform the judiciary. So it became impossible for him to be indicted, charged, tried, and put in jail for the crimes of corruption, which he apparently has committed. And so now you're a man who is desperately trying to stay out of jail. You're trying to divert attention from the reality that almost everything you do is centered on that. So, and remember, this is a guy who has to look in the mirror every morning. And, if he's an honest man, he looks in the mirror and says, well, you sort of committed a whole bunch of bad corruption crimes. And, but he's not that honest. He looks in the mirror and he does what many people do, when they're trying to convince themselves that they haven't committed a crime. They turn themselves into something different. They make it about something. They deflect away. Yeah. And so now we are into Netanyahu, talking about a greater Israel. It gets into, as you said, this messianic approach. I am the savior of Israel. I am this. He's redefining himself, but he doesn't believe it. He knows it's a lie. This isn't the natural Netanyahu. This is a desperate man who knows when he looks in the mirror, he's looking at the most corrupt human being in Israel. And it's only getting worse for him, because Gallant knows that there is this, committee, this investigation committee, that Netanyahu will be found guilty of neglect, that Netanyahu will become the most reviled man in the world, which is the last thing Netanyahu wants. He's trying to ensure that the political legacy of Benjamin Netanyahu is as the savior of Israel. Mm-hmm. But the reality is he's going to go down as the man who killed Israel, because Israel has been fatally harmed by Benjamin Netanyahu. The fights that are taking place in Israel right now are fights that Israel cannot recover from. These are fights that will eventually lead to fatal infighting. I think when, Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, they don't have to defeat Israel. Israel's defeated itself. The economy is collapsing, will not recover. Tourism, 90% down. It's probably going to go to 100% down. No one's going to visit there. No one's investing. People have lost faith. Israel's fallen apart on itself. The president of Israel warned of a civil war before October 7th. Now we're looking at the real potential of a civil war as we speak. The firing of Gallant has brought back even more divisions within Israeli society. It's a bad state of affairs if you're Israel.
Yeah. So Iran is talking about launching True Promise 3, I believe is what they're calling it. They made it very clear that they're going to launch this attack. It's going to be complex. At once, some of the reporting is calling it teeth breaking or tooth breaking. Why do you think they're considering launching this? I mean, initial attack when they were hit, it didn't seem like it was a significant attack by Israel. And there was this question about whether or not they were just going to say, yeah, you barely hit us, we're going to put it to bed. That's not the way they're looking at it, though. They're looking at it as we need to establish deterrence. Is that the thought, that they need to establish a certain amount of deterrence? And will they be able to establish deterrence in whatever attack they go about? Because apparently they seem to be signaling that they're going to cut loose. Give me your thoughts.
I mean, I've seen the same signals you do, and I'm not going to be disrespectful of the Iranian government and say that they're bluffing. But I would say this, that the Iranian government looks out for its strategic interests. There are those who believe that because of the scope and scale of the Israeli response, even though it wasn't as effective as Israel wanted it to be, Israel believes that it has it has deterred Iran.
Yeah.
And the Iranians want to say, no, we're the ones who deter you. You can't be allowed to think that you can launch 100 aircraft against Iran and get away with it.
Right.
And so that's what's driving this. But remember, Iran just came back from a BRICS meeting that is about the transformation of the globe. And one of the main messages that came out of BRICS was the concept of de-escalation of global crises. Right. That if Iran, as a member of BRICS, they are now a member in full standing, wants to adhere to the principles that were set forth and agreed to at BRICS, then escalation can't be part of their game plan. The other thing is, if I were the Iranians, I'd be looking at Israel right now and say, they're playing a losing hand. I mean, Israel's falling apart from within. Why do we want to prevent Israel from destroying itself? Because by attacking Israel, you change the dynamic. You may actually get Israel to rally around itself, to come to, to stop fighting each other and rally around against Iran. You may get the United States to jump on board here. Nothing good will come from this. It creates a regional conflict that will have global implications, because Israel and or the United States will respond, which will mean that they'll probably strike oil and energy related targets, which means that Iran will shut down regional energy production and shipment capability, which will generate a global economic crisis. It's not in Iran's benefit to do this. Iran needs, they're talking about pivoting to Eurasia, pivoting east to make up for years of Western sanctions by engaging in a constructive fashion with the East. A war with Israel makes all of that impossible. And so I do believe that inside Iran, there are voices that are saying, not right now.
Yeah.
Okay. We have the plan. We have the ability to do this. We know what we want to accomplish. But right now, it actually doesn't make strategic sense to attack Israel. Israel is dying. Let it die on its own volition, and preserve Iran's status and preserve Iran's strength, and keep Iran on the path of economic and geopolitical recovery.
You were a UN weapons inspector. I want to move to Ukraine, but I want one more question on Israel. The documents that were released when they were basically outed the attack that Israel was planning on doing. For one, do you think that was something that was leaked by the U.S. government officially? I mean, usually when, like Jack Teixeira, when he released those documents, they were able to find them pretty quickly. Usually there's some kind of identifying mark on the papers. Up to this point, nobody has been identified as the leaker for those documents, which makes me think it might have been an inside job. There's that. But on the second part, in regards to Israel having nukes, This is going unacknowledged, even though it's a secret that everybody knows. What is U.S. policy supposed to be with one of the countries that has nukes that are unacknowledged and that are not part of the non-proliferation agreement?
Well, I mean, this is one of the fundamental problems that's the United States has been faced with ever since Richard Nixon came into office.
Yeah.
Jack Kennedy knew that Israel was moving in this direction. Lyndon Johnson was unable to, undertake any specific policies to prevent an Israeli nuclear weapons program. Nixon was confronted with this, and that's when they made the decision, the United States and Israel, that the policy would be deliberate ambiguity, that Israel would not publicly acknowledge having a nuclear weapons program. I mean, they had detailed protocols, such as what would the steps have to be for Israel to acknowledge? What would it mean to be acknowledged? At what point in time does the United States have to say, oh my God, yes, Israel has a nuclear weapon, and therefore we now have to deal with the consequences of Israeli violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and America's violation by allowing this to happen without responding to it, et cetera, et cetera. But we've known Israel's had nuclear weapons for a long, long time. The fact that a U.S. intelligence document, because it is a U.S. intelligence document, makes reference to an intelligence conclusion doesn't mean that the United States has publicly acknowledged the Israel's nuclear weapons. That document wasn't meant for public release. That's not a press release by the U.S. government saying, America, this is what's happening. This was an internal document designed to inform internally about realities that we know exist. We know Israel has. I will tell you that in 1991, during the Gulf War, Israel fired a Jericho 3 missile as a test. It flew from Israel into the Mediterranean, the exact distance that it would have to fly to hit Baghdad.
Wow.
And I'm just telling you that the documents that discuss this within the policy community and the intelligence community all made reference to the nuclear capable Jericho 3, that this was a signal from Israel to Iraq that Israel has a nuclear weapon. And this is one of the, when you go back to the Nixon protocols about how Israel acknowledges a nuclear weapon, one of the ways that they can do it without saying we have a nuclear weapon is a test of a nuclear delivery system.
Mm-hmm.
And so Israel's already flexed its nuclear muscles in the past, and we've acknowledged it, but we don't call it a nuclear weapon. And that's where we're at today. Israel continues to have this policy of deliberate ambiguity. The United States officially endorses that policy because we can't admit, the moment we admit Israel has a nuclear weapon, first of all, we run into a huge problem now telling the Iranians, well, you can't have one too. And then we have a problem of what to do, because now by law, we have to disarm Israel. And that's not going to happen. So the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty falls apart, collapses, and then that now if Israel publicly acknowledges having a nuclear weapon, we acknowledge that Saudi Arabia is going to want a nuclear weapon. You're going to see the complete breakdown of nuclear non-proliferation, even more than it's already broken down. So it's a policy quandary for the United States.
That is frustrating, because from my point of view, I understand it's an intelligence document, but that intelligence document was in the news. Meaning it's, people have been made aware in broad terms at this point. Do you have any concerns that if Iran unleashes, let's say, a devastating attack, that Israel would basically use it as a casus belli for nukes, to basically say, okay, we've been attacked in this particular way, we feel that our existence is at stake, and now nukes are now on the table?
100%. I mean, that's one of the big dangers of an Iranian retaliation, and this is why I articulate as forcefully as I do in this manner. I understand that that my voice is heard inside Iran. That when I speak about Iran on programs like this, it resonates inside Iran. So I'm speaking to the Iranian government right now, and I'm speaking to the Iranian people. Israel will destroy itself. You don't need to do anything more. But if you launch this Operation True Promise 3 and it has the punch that you claim it will be, and there's no reason to doubt this, all you do is trigger the Samson option. And understand the thing about the Samson option is the people who order it don't care that that may prompt you to take whatever surviving capacity you have and create your own nuclear weapon that strikes back at Israel. The Samson option implies the temple has come down. So Israel doesn't care at this point in time that you're going to put nuclear weapons on a collapsed temple. Israel will use the nuclear weapons because they believe that it's coming down. The Samson option is to bring everything down with it. And all they will do is kill tens of millions of Iranians, destroy Iranian infrastructure, destroy Iranian civilization, destroy Iran. Do you want that to happen? And the answer has to be no.
Yeah.
It has to be no, especially since right now Israel is falling apart. Let Israel eat itself. They don't need a push from you. The Soviet Union collapsed. They were the largest nuclear armed nation in the world. And they collapsed. And there was no nuclear war.
Yeah.
Israel will collapse. As they collapse,
I want to move to Ukraine for a bit.
The world will deal with Israel's nuclear.
One of the generals, I think it was in Bild, I forget, it was a German publication, Bild, I forget the name, but he pointed out the front has collapsed. And he was speaking about it very openly, basically saying, it's understood at this point that the front has collapsed. This hasn't necessarily been going all that well. The New York Times has finally come around to the view that it's not a stalemate after all, that they're actually getting crushed on the battlefield. How long do you think this is going to last? I mean, especially the new president is in office. There seems to be a different point of view on this issue of Ukraine. How long do you think the Ukrainian military is going to hold out? And more to the point, well, yeah, let's go with that first, because it's a different model. I mean, initially I was going to ask, how do you think it ends? Does it end with us cynically pushing the Russians to basically take it all and going into guerrilla war? But with Donald Trump in office, this may be a different outcome. So I guess my question is, how long do you think this, the Ukrainian military can last?
War is a lot of factors. You have to have weapons, you have to have ammunition, you have to have gas, you have to have training, structure, etc. But at the end of the day, you have to have men and women who are willing to sacrifice their lives in defense of a cause. And they have to believe that the sacrifices they're being asked to make are not in vain. If you're in the Ukrainian military right now, the election of Donald Trump means that everything you've done has been in vain, and everything they're asking you to do is in vain. That the superhuman heroism that you've exhibited on the battlefield, because they should have collapsed a long time ago. Russian soldiers, Russian officers all say the same thing. We don't understand why they continue to fight to the death. It's a hopeless situation. Any other army would have dropped their weapons and surrendered, but the Ukrainians continue to fight to the death. They make the Russians kill every single one of them in their defensive positions. And I think the reason is that the Ukrainians actually believe in what they're fighting for. You have to respect that. The Ukrainian soldiers believe in what they're fighting for. They believe that by fighting the way they do, by sacrificing, they are creating the conditions for eventual victory for Ukraine. There's now no hope for victory for Ukraine.
Yeah,
That's acknowledged that they aren't getting the 1991 borders back. In fact, it's worse. They may lose everything. But they still fight out of principle that as long as people are willing to support us, we will still fight in the miracle that something's going to happen. They now know there will be no miracle. They now know the cavalry isn't coming. They now know that they're just going to die in vain. And I think what you're going to see is the total collapse of the Ukrainian military now, because as soon as that realization sinks in, and it's going to sink in over the course of coming weeks, There's talk, that Biden's going to release, the last billions of dollars in the in the
Aid.
coffer,
Yeah.
but there's nothing behind that. Remember, $6 billion in a war that we've already invested 120 some odd $1 billion in isn't going to change the game. It's
Yeah.
going to prolong the agony. But the only reason why to continue the agony is in the hope that beyond that 6 billion will be another 6 billion. We now know that isn't going to happen. There is no more money. On January 20th, the spigot is turned off.
Yeah.
And I think at this point in time, you're going to see, with that reality in mind, the Ukrainians are going to collapse. You're going to see a total collapse in the Donbass front. And then you're going to see the Ukrainians starting to talk about bringing an end to this conflict. And, and then this is the other thing. Trump has apparently told Zelensky, get it done before January 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Biden. Biden will, do the thing. But you want me, you're going to run out of options because I'm just going to shut it down. Yeah. Trump isn't going to be making a phone call to Putin and threatening Putin. That just isn't going to happen. But what he can do is call Putin and said, I'm going to end it. What do you want the next step to be? How do we end this thing? How do we bring this thing down? The Russians have said, we've heard them, but we want to see more substance here. So Trump knows he has to put, pelts on the wall, so to speak. He's going to have to compel Ukraine to do something that is demonstrable. And between now and January 20th, I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of pressure being placed on Ukraine by the president-elect and his transition team to bring an end to this war. Politically, Trump needs that. Imagine if on Inauguration Day he can say, and as I promised you, the war in Ukraine is over.
Yeah.
And it's because of me.
Scott Ritter, UN's weapons master, former UN weapons. There we are, UN weapons inspector and weapons of mass destruction whistleblower. You can follow Scott on Telegram. Man, always appreciate you joining me. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. All right. Great interview with Scott. Always appreciate him joining us. He is a fan favorite, to put it mildly. I'm going to take a quick break. My name is Jamal Thomas. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment.
Gonna win this fucking thing. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm so pissed off. God damn it. How did we get here? How did we get here? What in the Alice in Wonderland nightmares is going on right now? All I can say is how fucking dare you. If you voted for that man, if you voted for anybody other than Kamala and you live in one of the states that it was, close, or if you didn't vote, fuck you. It's not gonna happen. Go, Kamala. I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I love you. How the fuck is this?
I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. Love you. Love you. I love the one who's landing. She's like, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. He's not gonna win. It's not gonna happen. I was watching the meltdowns when MSNBC, the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur lost his mind. He flipped out. Kamala Harris got choked up giving her speech. Look, I told you, man, I am a big fan of concession speeches. I think it's the most important element in a political race. You've called this person everything but a child of God. And the political race, at its core, is really a contest. Now, in the old days, it would be, I have a sword, you have a sword, and we fight each other to the death. Or I have an army, you have an army, and we fight each other to the death. Now, you can imagine that's kind of expensive every time that you try to figure out who's going to be in charge and who's going to lead. And so you come up with a rule set, a game of sorts, that people can engage in to avoid bloodshed. The concession speech is that thing where the loser accepts the Constitution matters more. America matters more. So yes, I would prefer to win. Yes, this is humiliating right now. And yes, I've called this person everything but a child of God. But they won. They're the leader of the country. And I'm now going to go home and I'm going to leave. That's a good thing. That's how it's supposed to work. And like I said, I don't think Trump would have been as gracious as Kamala Harris was in accepting that L, despite the fact that she didn't come out the first night. So there is that. Look, I want to thank you guys for joining me. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'm run from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Not to mention I pop in all times of the day and night. So definitely share, like the video right now if you dig what I'm putting down. Subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 40,000 by Christmas. So definitely hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Because again, I pop in at all hours. And if you want to hear this voice in your ear and see this face with this hat, hit the notification bell. One other thing, if you guys dig the content, meaning if you enjoy this content, definitely consider helping out through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. Any chat that is provided will be read, providing it is not racist, bigoted, sexist, etc. All of it helps the show. I often say even a dollar helps because it is true. Even a dollar helps. We have a really good crowd here today. We have gotten up to over 300. It started to slow down once it got left, but fair enough. Hopefully those people will come back once we get into the next interview. What time is it? We have Scottie, who's going to come on in the next 5 or 6 minutes, give or take. But before I get to Scottie, we went and we were discussing the meltdowns. So one of the things that I pointed out over the course of the news, I got some of the big stories: Gallant being fired, the German government collapsing, Donald Trump winning in somewhat of a landslide. And as I was discussing over, I think yesterday, Michigan, bravo, Michigan. If you remember, the Muslim community, especially with the uncommitted vote, came out and said, look, Joe Biden only won by 150,000 votes in this state, in Michigan. We have 100,000 people who signed up for uncommitted. If you do not address this issue, meaning you're backing a genocide, you're killing people who look like me, who have my same religion, then you're not going to get our votes. Now, the Harris team apparently thought they were joking or didn't take them seriously or believed that they can shave off that element of the party and go towards getting the Liz Cheney type Republicans who ended up being a unicorn. Apparently, those Liz Cheney Republicans didn't exist because, as Scott pointed out, if those Liz Cheney Republicans existed in any numbers, Harris would be sitting in the White House as opposed to sitting at home listening to Beyonce give a concert, a private one, because they lost. I guess my point is this. There's something to be said about making a threat, and you're making a threat for good reason. You're backing a genocide. Stop. What are you doing? And not just what are you doing, why do we even have to tell you that? Meaning, why do I have to communicate to you that a genocide is wrong? And instead of spending the entire year explaining to me why I should not care about all of these people being slaughtered and killed, maybe should just stop doing that. Democrats didn't want to do that. Kamala Harris didn't want to unwed herself from it. In fact, not just not unwedding herself from it. If you remember one of the last few times that she said anything about it, she said this.
How did we get here? How risky is it that you could lose the election? Well, it is undeniable that it is something that everyone is aware of what is happening there. I speak publicly all the time about the fact that there are so many tragic stories coming from Gaza, and of course, the first in this phase of everything that has happened, the first most tragic story is October 7th, and what happened that day, and then what has happened since. And I think what's critically important as we look at this moment is, one, acknowledging the tragedy of what has happened in Gaza in terms of the extraordinary number of.
I don't think they are going to accept that the greatest tragedy is October 7th, especially considering Israel has killed 40 to 100,000 men, women, and children, 2/3 of which are women and children. They've expanded to killing more in Lebanon, where they're effectively trying to blackmail the Lebanese government by killing as many as possible in order to try to force the government to allow them to steal southern Lebanon. When you have killed that many people, when you have attacked that many hospitals, when you've killed that many journalists, when you have starved intentionally, I don't think that they're going to come to the conclusion that the greatest tragedy is October 7th, especially considering October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. We're talking about something that's been going on for 70 years. And the plight of the Palestinian people, especially after the Nakba, where like hundreds of thousands were evicted, not to mention the tens of thousands that were slaughtered in the process of doing that. Those people were effectively refugees, and they were treated miserably as their land was being stolen, as their people were being put in prison, as they were being or under systemic rapes, or for that matter, used as human shields. I'm saying that the conditions that the Palestinians were in was appalling. That was before October 7th. October 7th happened as a direct result of everything that came before October 7th. Pretending as if everything started there is a problem. And I guess that's the rub, right? You had all of these psychopaths, sociopaths that came out and lied for the Israeli government. Now, if you are Arab, if you're a Muslim, if you are a person with a very basic level of conscience, it is outrageous. Not just outrageous. Any and every argument that they made to you in order to downplay what they were supporting, what they were backing, what they were funding, what they were giving diplomatic and political support to, every argument ultimately fails flat, because every argument boils down to, hey, I know you're concerned about all of these people being slaughtered and ethnically cleansed and killed and everything else, but we got to get Kamala Harris elected because Donald Trump is an ogre. That's not the most satisfying argument in the world. And if your party is effectively backing a genocide to get elected, maybe you shouldn't get elected. It's that part. Meaning, whatever Trump does is hypothetical. You are sitting in that office now. And it is vitally important to instill this notion, this idea, this almost a rule of law that you cannot support a genocide and get elected. Full stop. Now, Michigan and the Arabs in Michigan pointed out, you won't get our support. And if you remember, they came out and they said, Donald Trump is a man of peace. and they said we're backing Trump. You had Amans coming out saying they were backing Trump. You had Yemenis coming out saying they were backing Trump. You had Somalis coming out saying they were backing Trump. And on election night, when you look at Dearborn, Michigan, look at this. 36% on Harris, 42% for Trump. Jill Stein, who normally gets like 0.5%, 18%. What that means, though, is when Joe Biden ran the last time, Joe Biden pulled in over 70% of that vote. So a tally in 2020 where he was able to pull in 76%, if I'm not mistaken. Harris was only able to get 30% this time around. They were aggravated, they got involved, and they punished the Democrats for effectively backing that strategy. Bravo, Michigan. And we have a guest, Scottie Nell Hughes. How you doing, Scottie?
I am tired, Jamal. I'll be honest with you. I think it's been 3 days straight of the international networks all curious about. First it was who's going to win the election. And now we're going, how are they reacting to the election? So it has been 3 straight days. I think my sleep is completely off. I've kicked my husband upstairs just because everyone around the world right now it's just been an interesting wave to watch because going into it, everybody was, I felt like a lot of the mainstream media, same issues we have here in DC and in the West, that they were very much not looking forward to Trump. They thought Kamala was going to win. And I was having to, do a little, I'm going to say punching back more than I'd like to at traditional. Now it is, you can tell there's almost a sigh of relief across the board. Those same people that I spoke to 24 hours before are, you can see it's like, oh, wait a minute. They see the reaction from world leaders right now. They're seeing what you point out, the statistic of Dearborn, the Muslims in Dearborn. Meanwhile, you also have the Orthodox Jews in New York celebrating. They're seeing that, that you have both sides because I think everybody knows that under this administration, we were headed on a pathway guaranteed to put us at war and to have more people's blood sacrificed. I think with Donald Trump, they're all going, knowing his America First policy, as long as he can stick to what he said, that just the withdrawal of the American influence on these two conflicts makes people feel like that they are on a way to peace. And I have to believe that at this stage.
Scottie Nell Hughes, she's a veteran political commentator and, well,
are we still Russian spies though? Even though, I feel like the world changed. Are we still termed Russian spies?
I don't know. I have an independent channel. I don't know if we're still considered propagandists. No, my points of view haven't necessarily changed. But apparently we get hit with that label.
But let me say this. I think this was one thing, and you can see it even in the left, they're even having to admit it. This has shown that the power shift has changed from the mainstream broadcast media to the online alternative, what was considered to be alternative media. It is showing the power that is existing. So maybe now we understand why they tried to take us out. Maybe they should put their efforts into Joe Rogan and those sorts. But definitely it is showing the power that I think even the mainstream's recognizing that they don't get the eyeballs, or they might get the eyeballs, but they're not necessarily getting the brains and the souls of the American people like they used to.
Yeah. Not to mention their analysis is usually trash. Like I was watching MSNBC and some of the stuff they were saying, like they were shell-shocked. And I don't know why they were shell-shocked. When I was looking at the map that I came up with just before the election, I could not figure out how Harris would win. And when you just went through the basic polling and you went from state to state to state, the only state that I wasn't sure about was Pennsylvania and Michigan. I thought Trump was going to get Pennsylvania. I was unsure about Michigan. He ends up getting Michigan and Wisconsin. And to boot, apparently Harris raised over $1 billion. Donald Trump only raised about $400 million. That is shocking.
And she's in debt. I'm loving this part. Sorry, I keep having Andrew Tate. I was watching. It's funny. I was watching the reaction of it, and this morning, and I apologize for like, but Andrew Tate went on. I'm not a big Andrew Tate fan at all, but I'm watching the reaction of people like Steve Bannon, Andrew Tate, the ones that have been prosecuted and spent jail time for their involvement with Donald Trump the last 4 years. And they are so, talk about people that deserve to have their victory round, but they are angry. They are so happy this happened because they believe that they truly were the target. They were of the DOJ. And they are wanting justice for the time and what has happened to them. I think I was even watching Alex Jones. I know that's in the past. I said I don't endorse everything these men say.
Yeah.
You cannot deny that they have not been targeted. When we don't even know who's on the Epstein list, when we don't even know the P. Diddy party list, but yet they're going after, let's be fair to all. Let's ask for justice for all. But you can see this past 4 years, the DOJ has been weaponized and to go against certain individuals while turning a blind eye to another. That is not how it's supposed to work in America. So all of these folks that have considered themselves, and I even put us somewhat not in the category with them, but people that have been targeted by this DOJ, we're all sitting back and we're going, okay, maybe we might get justice for what has happened to us. For, in our case, is just doing our job as American citizens under freedom of the press and freedom of speech. We're still being punished, which most Americans don't recognize. Because we really don't want to say anything else about it. But back to my original question, it just shows the power of online media right now. And the mainstream media, not only did they have the revelation that they no longer have the power, but neither does their leadership.
Well, their response to that was to try to have the Ministry of Truth. Like all of this was during the Biden's term, right? Ministry of Truth. You've had Hillary Clinton coming out saying people who are putting out misinformation should be locked up. You've had John Kerry saying that the First Amendment needs to be altered or changed somehow. You had Kamala Harris saying that she wanted to go after Twitter. And even on The View, where The View was like, oh, these people are totally being misinformed, which is why they voted for Trump. And so we need to do something about social media, and we need to regulate social media that much more. Meaning, from their point of view, well, Trump got elected, and so we need to do something about the information sources that people get, because if people got better information, they wouldn't vote for Trump. Just outrageous stuff. Like they don't care about the First Amendment. They're dangerous. They're dangerous.
Now, what I do, let's put this on an optimistic note, because this is the question I'm getting. What is Trump's first thing going to do? Because if you look at a lot of the tiers that are happening on social media, I don't know what they think is going to happen. I don't know if they think Trump is going to go down the voter rolls and find out who voted against him and collect him and put him in the gulag.
Well, Scottie, wait. I wanted to get your reaction to something, by the way, while we're talking about this, because as you're talking about the liberals melting down, I want to show some of what has been taking place on liberal media and on liberal YouTube after the election result. You're going to love this. This is meltdowns.
How did we get here? How did we get here? What in the Alice in Wonderland nightmares is going on right now? All I can say is how fucking dare you? If you voted for that man, if you voted for anybody other than Kamala, and you live in one of the states that it was, close, or if you didn't vote, fuck you. It's not gonna happen. Go Kamala. I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I love you. How the fuck?
I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I guess I guess the question is, to your point, what do they think is going to happen? And is it that they've just got so worked up with the Hitler and fascist stuff that they really fully believe it?
Okay, let's just take how you feel about being pro-life, pro-choice out of it, because I think that's where a lot of fueling this women, my daughters. I think the most ironic issue, the iconic interview from the day was the man who walked out and he was in tears and he said, I voted because I have daughters and their rights need to be preserved. Okay. Right. In the back of my mind, I'm going, wait, you literally just voted for your daughters to be able to kill your grandchildren. Now, forget about how you feel about abortion or not. I get the right. I get it. Be so emotional about that's the only reason why you voted is so that they can have the right to kill your grandchildren. Not I voted so that my daughters could have the ability to afford children if they wanted to in the
Right,
future.
right.
That my daughters don't have to go off to war. That my daughters don't, like, it was so that they could have the right to kill your grandchildren. Could you imagine the 1940s, the boomer generation, actually coming out and saying that? Could you imagine prior to that, the 19, like, once again, however you feel about it, but if that is your single issue that you went in there and voted because you feel like that is the only thing that is important to America
It's a
today,
little weird.
you're the problem. And you're right. That is the weird part, the weird side of it. But that's what the Democrats did, is they made this issue all about reproductive rights. And we still had ballot initiatives across the United States. I haven't done the complete analysis yet, but I think the majority of them to protect the right to abortion that were proposed in certain states did pass. Florida didn't, but I think a couple of them I saw in other states, I think it did pass. So people did what it's supposed to do. We took the power out of DC, put it in the states, that the people in the state decide. And across the board, I know you don't, this is an issue and you and I can debate.
Yeah, yeah, we're not going to agree on this.
I believe that you have to start somewhere. If that is our goal, is to decentralize the power of the federal government, then this is a good issue. Conservatives can't have it both ways. We can't say that we want states' rights, but then on an issue that we are religious about, make it only a federal issue. No, that's the problem. Why conservatives are so upset over this is now we actually have to fight at the state level. Now it was easy for us to go to Washington, D.C. and make them be basically dictators for a power that was not given to them. Now we actually have to take it to our states. I mean, and it's across the board. So I think that's a big, but the liberal tears, their meltdown, I really want to ask them, what do you think is going to happen?
I really think that this talk about Trump is Hitler, Trump's a fascist. Do you remember they were doing this quiz and they were asking little kids basically what did they think about the political candidates? And Democratic kids were more likely to call and say Trump is Hitler, Trump is so-and-so, meaning the conversations that those parents were having around those kids basically boil down to Donald Trump is synonymous with a man that killed 50 million people and put 6 million Jews in concentration camps. Like, that's their argument. And so I think that a lot of these people, they believe it. Like flesh to bone, I think a lot of them believe it.
Well, and that's the scary part of it, because when it's one of those, the boy who cried wolf. As long as you keep throwing that term around on your enemy, and I get it, it's a very effective term. Then when we really have one that appears, we don't identify him. That's what's so funny about it, is that when we really have somebody that is that authoritarian, that is so dangerous, that is that evil, we don't actually identify him, because we've become so just throwing that term around. That's always been my issue with racism. Any of these emotional terms, when you falsely throw it around for political purposes, when it is actually happening, you're less likely to get an effective solution for it and the attention that it deserves. And that right there is what I think is so dangerous, and why these tears and these meltdowns, they're fun to watch, but why they're actually dangerous, because they're going to lead to a very complicit society that can be easily swayed. And as a dictatorship can take over. I don't necessarily see it in the West. I think it'll be really interesting to see where this goes. But I do have to tell you one thing, because I doubt, have you covered Donald Trump's first action as president-elect?
No.
Okay, so put out a video yesterday. I actually think, it's like, how do you bring together a country? Everybody's asking, how is Donald Trump going to bring together? Puts out a video. I really want you to go watch it. Next year, whether love or hate, next year is the 250th birthday of the United States. So starting on Memorial Day for one full year, he is planning a wide variety of events all around the United States that will focus on the 250th birthday of the United States. It's not political, Republican, Democrat. He wants to host the largest state fair ever. Iowa, he wants every state to come in and throw this huge state fair in Iowa, bring everybody to the Midwest. He wants to build a garden in Washington, D.C. of the 50 most impactful Americans, positive impacts on America. But a statue garden. He wants to do events like that. That is not a political idea. And we can talk about the bad things America has done in her history, and those will definitely. But on a birthday, it's kind of like your own family birthday. You want to address the positive things. And there has been a lot of good things this country has done. So I think it's actually just they talk about how is he going to unify? Who doesn't get united by a party, especially if it's taxpayer funded?
Yeah. I love that idea. I mean, it's the anniversary. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's it's a gimme. It's an easy thing to do, right? Especially something that can bring people together. So no, I definitely agree.
It was a little
I
awkward
was
tonight. That was
watching
something though.
MSNBC having a meltdown, and Joyanne Reed, who always, to time traveling hackers and stuff like that, she said something to the effect of Kamala Harris ran a flawless, historic campaign, and that effectively that we shouldn't ignore the fact that sexism and racism are key elements that it would be difficult for a woman of color in order to get elected. Now, do you think because I did a video on this yesterday where I basically put a knife in that this is outrageous that you're trying to say this woman ran a flawless campaign. Do you think she ran a flawless campaign? Do you think the blame lies more so with Joe Biden? Because there's been a lot of people that have been putting the blame on Joe Biden, effectively saying you were supposed to be a transient president, which means you were supposed to stop after the first year, which would have allowed a primary, which would allow the strongest person to get the mantle, as opposed to, throwing her into the lion's den with a few weeks to go. Give me your take on that. Who do you think bears more responsibility for this? Harris running a bad campaign, or Joe Biden not getting out of the race when he said he was going to get out the race?
Well, let me say this. I think the public display, and even I don't think it was Joy, it was Simone was on MSNBC, and she accurately called it. When you start off a campaign by a very brutal, backstabbing execution of the leader of your party for 3 years that you tell people to follow and that he's doing great, it's not going to go well. The fact that they did this so publicly, and then they still have him in office. I mean, if he was really as bad as he should have been removed.
Agreed.
Completely. And so when you're giving this mixed message, she put the blame when you're starting off on an et tu Brute, Caesar Augustus type movement. It's not going to end well, regardless of how much you do. But I'm going to point this out. I was really surprised yesterday to see the type of, and I'm going to almost call it sexist on the reverse, the type of bashing that they did on males, on the black males, the Hispanic males. I mean, no offense, if you were listening to some of these pundits, it was your fault, Jamal. Never have I ever heard white people, white women and black women blame black men and Hispanic men and diversity while still claiming that they are being discriminated against. Like,
when Joe Scarborough said I was racist,
you were racist.
He said Hispanic men were racist.
And let me just call it out. And I actually did a TikTok at 2 a.m. on this because I was so angry at the last interview I did. It was the women that kept, I know TikTok of all things. That shows how things have changed. It was the women that got Kamala Harris out of office. It was the women that kept Hillary Clinton out of office. This is the one thing that united. Women are harder on other women than men will ever be, at least out in public. We will tear each other to shreds. We are not a sexist country from a presidential standpoint. It has to be the right woman. I asked my son.
It's the right woman,
I said, tell me, what was the locker room talk yesterday about it? He said, Mom, you wouldn't like it. It was pretty sexist. I said, really? I said, so you think that it was, that she got elected because she was a woman? And he said, yeah. I said, well, do you agree with that? He's like, actually, he says, no, because I think Tulsi Gabbard would be an amazing president of the United States.
Right.
Okay, that doesn't make you sexist. If you can actually say it's time to have a female president, the problem is we keep putting in the wrong female candidate, and then we claim sexism. I don't care if she was a man. We would not have voted her in. She actually, I think, was given a lot of benefit of the doubt and grace for her lack of foreign policy, for her lack of diplomatic relations, for her lack of policy even and domestically. I think she was given a pass for what she did in California because she was a woman. She was given more grace than a man ever would have been for her policy. I don't think a man with her qualifications would have actually been able to run for president.
Yeah, I don't buy the premise that it was because she was black or a woman. I mean, if you look at the polling, for example, she was in lead all the way up until like October 20th or something. I mean, like going all the way into November, she was in the lead. Then she fell off a cliff. I mean, you could see it. Like there was just a precipitous drop at a certain point, which means for the longest time, she had this kind of glow where, like you pointed out, she was grandfathered in on some level. She was different. They accepted her as different, and she had zero issue. The closer it got to the polling, the more she talked, the worse it got for her. And I think that it has more to do with her and the campaign she ran. Like, for example, you're running around the country with Liz Cheney. There's that, which means you're demoralizing your base. You carve off the left, which is basically what you're doing. You're reaching out to Republicans as opposed to reaching out to elements of your base. And to make it even worse, you ignore the Arab community, like completely. Don't allow them on stage at the DNC. You act like that's not really an issue that you want to deal with. I mean, you could go down the list, not articulating things about yourself, meaning you're not giving your thesis of the case. You instead spend your entire time screeching and screaming at Donald Trump, something that Hillary Clinton did, by the way, that didn't necessarily make that many gains. I think a lot of the fault in this lies with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris had the potential to win this race. I just think she failed.
But to my point, though, name me one of her accomplishments prior to running for even as a VP. Name me something that she accomplished.
She was the borders off, Scottie.
I mean, name me something that would make her qualified. Now, granted, you might not like Trump, but you cannot deny he's got buildings with his name on it. He was, even though they would have painted him as unsuccessful, he's been a successful businessman. He still is a billionaire. However, he has achieved success in his right of field, in his passing. Name me something she did. Name me some legislation that was actually beneficial. You know, I saw one of the most effective commercials was in California, the woman who was put in jail. And I'm a huge truancy person. I believe they should go to school, as probably mine's not school yet. But I believe she put a woman in jail for truancy because her daughter was having treatments in the hospital.
Yep.
So how does that qualify? How do those policies that have no sort of empathy in them qualify you to run for president? Even running as a senator out of California, what legislation did she sponsor that made America a better place?
Well, to make it worse, she laughed at it. She said truancy. She said she used to like to use that particular weapon, and she wanted to start charging people as crimes for it. And in one case, the woman was homeless.
Yes.
And the kids couldn't go to school because the woman was homeless, and she still put the woman in jail, or tried to put the woman in jail.
So and I do believe that I think if you would have, oddly enough, Shapiro out of Pennsylvania, a lot of people say if he would have been the vice presidential purpose, if he would have been the nominee, that she might have had a better chance. I don't know, but there's a lot of other people that I think in the Democrat Party that could have a better resume. And she only got to this place, given a lot of grace because of her gender. And I think so to turn around and call this country, I do. I see it. I think that she just doesn't.
I so disagree with that, but go ahead.
I know you do, but she doesn't have the qualifications that I think a lot of people I think there's probably even, for the love of God, Nancy Pelosi. I don't agree with 99% stuff she's done, but by golly, she's done something. You can actually see the effect she's had. So why did they run her if they're going to run a female for president? I think there were other more effective females in the party that even at this point, I feel like AOC has done more for the Democrat Party than Kamala Harris did. I
would agree with you on this. I would agree with you on this. When Joe Biden chose her, Joe Biden was put into somewhat of a box. If you remember, this guy, the one from South Carolina, he basically pushed Joe Biden to choose Kamala Harris because Joe Biden was losing to Sanders. He needed his support. It starts with a T. It'll come to me in a moment. And so his thing was like, okay, well, you need to choose a Black woman for VP. Now, what's her name? The woman in Atlanta.
Yes.
Atlanta. Stacey Abrams. She wanted the spot.
Right.
Biden ended up giving to Harris. And so agreed, right? Like, she wasn't chosen because she was the best candidate. She was chosen because Joe Biden was kind of over a barrel. When it got to the debate and Joe Biden flamed out, I don't think Joe Biden ever had any intention on letting Kamala Harris run. Like, meaning he might have started off as a transient candidate, but I think somewhere along the way, he didn't think she could win. And because he didn't think she could win, his thought was, I'm going to have to win it, and then she can take over. What do you think about that, by the way? Do you think that I'm right on that? Like, in the very beginning, everybody had this idea that she's a bad candidate, she's unlikable, there's no way you can put her in to run. It would have to be Joe Biden. When Joe Biden flamed out, they couldn't figure out a way to give it to Newsom or somebody else. How are you going to step over the Black woman in order to give it to the white guy? In which case, they were stuck with Harris. Like, what is your thought on that? Do you think that's my hypothesis anyway. What are your thoughts?
If they really wanted Kamala Harris to be president of the United States, they would have had him step down a year ago, 2 years ago, because this issues with that they're saying his health reasons, they didn't just
Yeah.
come up in July.
Yeah.
But they never wanted. They put her away. I love this idea. Well, nobody knew who she was. She didn't have the name recognition Donald Trump had for the last 4 years, mainly because the Democrats kept putting his name in the headlines. We're talking about karma. But if they really wanted her to be president, they had a very good opportunity for the last 4 years to make her president. And I agree with you. It would have been real awkward to see why. But if they can sell to the American people that Joe Biden has enough dementia that he shouldn't run for office after he's been running for office after he has the Democratic nomination, then they could have sold any reason. They could have, whatever deal they made, struck with her and said, she's decided that she needs to stay home with the family. Like, there's all sorts of reasons that they could have put somebody else in. Part of me thinks that they knew at that time that they weren't going to win regardless. And they did not want to sacrifice a Shapiro, even a Pete Buttigieg, definitely a Gavin Newsom. They did not want to sacrifice on an already uphill battle. And those bump in the poll numbers that I think you saw, it wasn't Kamala Harris that caused the poll numbers. It was everybody thinking, hey, at least it's no Biden, not Joe Biden. It's a breath of fresh air. The bump in the numbers was because the Democrats wanted to have a Democrat. The Democrats wanted to believe that their party was going to be able to win and salvage the Senate. And so you could have put Big Bird with the D by his name. In fact, probably could have done better because of the joy. But the second that, because you looked at Kamala Harris, she had a 92% withdrawal rate from her people in her own office. They just did not like her. Nobody likes her. And so that was just one of those, I almost think that potentially could be it, except I'm already hearing rumors that the reason why her speech yesterday was so dignified, which it was she feels like she has a chance at 2028. She is not done. She wants to come back, and she does, and she did not burn those bridges yesterday in her speech.
I'm sorry, her career is over in regards to running for president. I said years ago Kamala Harris would never be president of the United States, and I stand by that.
Well, like I said, she doesn't feel that way yet. Let's see how the Democrats handle her for the next 4 years to figure that out.
What do you think the Democrats become now? I mean, because there's a fascinating look. I guess from my point of view, I always ask this basic question, especially when I'm talking to Democrats. Donald Trump was convicted. I mean, was impeached twice. He was convicted in a court of law in regards to a felony. He lost a lawsuit of being a sexual assaulter. He was shot nearly twice, or shot once, nearly assassinated twice. They chased him around with like 90 different criminal indictments, and yet they couldn't beat that guy. And it wasn't like Donald Trump was all that coherent over the campaign trail. I mean, he didn't even have that good of a debate. And yet the Democratic Party, whatever their failings, could not mount an argument to best that guy. And I guess my thing to Democrats is always, if he's as bad as you say he is, and if you guys are as smart as you think you are, why can't you win a race? And they never have an answer to that question. I guess my question to you is, what happens now to the Democratic Party now that Harris has flamed out? And let's be very clear for the moment. It's not like Harris had a movement. And, you know, I used to point out that Joe Biden was just a placeholder. Joe Biden, there was nobody who loved Joe Biden. They just needed Joe Biden to get past Trump. And so it's not the situation where there's this kind of movement around them like a Sanders or like an Obama, or for that matter, like a Trump. It's, you have somebody who they just needed to beat Trump. It was just that, no more, no less. So what happens now to the Democratic Party now that Joe Biden is out, Kamala Harris is out, and they have just lost in what looks like a landslide?
Okay, so I'm going to put my nonpartisan hat on here because I've been there in 2020 when Joe Biden was put in, and the House and the Senate, the control was in the Democrats' hands. What the Republicans had to do was sit back and just seize every opportunity, and the Democrats gave it to us. If the Democrats were smart, they would take us right now. Their reaction is going to, they're no longer going to need to be in the offense. They need to be in the defensive mode, and they need to be the ones that are reacting to every single thing that the Republicans do that they don't like. And they need to be unified. The problem with Trump is what they did is they threw everything at him. Yep. To which it became so absurd. people then started saying, you know what, maybe he is being targeted. Maybe his whole idea that he's being unfairly targeted, maybe that's legit. If they would have just done one or two cases or one or two things and just stuck with one in one state, it might have actually been more effective in trying to put this idea that he's a convicted felon out there. It might have actually held more water to it. But the fact that they kept going on and on and on, and then these cases started fizzling out, I think that actually aided in the fact that people were like, okay, they really are targeted. They don't like him. And every person exists in their own world knows that if everybody's coming against you and you're in your mind doing something right, that's probably why they want to take you out. So people related to him being taken out and people targeting him. So I think if Democrats sit back, Trump has to right now fulfill his promises. And his first promise was to get out of these wars, to bring peace to the world. The second promise was to secure the border, and that comes with responsible immigration reform. I'm going to go back, and this is the reason that he lost to Ann Coulter. It's the reason why he lost Matt Drudge. He's got to go back to his 2016 promise that he was going to build a giant wall, but with a big giant door. He was going to reform the immigration process that was and allow those who legitimately wanted to come to America to have that ability and not take 10 years and not cost tens of thousands of dollars and all the corruption that's involved in trying to become a legal citizen of the United States. That was his campaign promise in 2016. He didn't fulfill it. He made a lot of hardcore conservatives angry about that because, like I said, we want to be a country full of diversity that welcomes those from around the world. But we want people that want to come here and be like you and I, tax-paying, responsible citizens. And those are the kind of folks that we need to welcome in and make the process much easier for them.
Agreed. And, one of the things, look, countries have borders, right? That's the thing that makes a country a country. So I don't necessarily have an issue with the border. I don't like the rhetoric and the emphasis that Donald Trump put on that rhetoric over the course of the campaign. But look, he won. So, whatever I think, it apparently was successful. I'm curious on this other front. So right now, Donald Trump came out, one of his first campaign speeches. He said, I'm going to end wars, not start them. He was very clear. Marco Rubio came out calling for the end of the Ukraine war. J.D. Vance has called for the end of these wars on more than one occasion, and even gave the speech in Congress where he pointed out that China's diplomacy is building, roads and farms and helping countries where our country is moralizing with these countries that is basically turning these countries away. Trump has even pointed out about like BRICS, basically saying all of these countries have started to organize to get rid of the dollar. This stuff is a problem. And he brought this up in the context of sanctions, saying he's going to get rid of the sanctions on Russia. Now, I don't know if he's going to do all this or not. He's putting in a lot. But are you concerned when he's choosing people like Hook or Pompeo to be in his administration? These people are hardcore neocons. How are you going to do both with these people? People are policy, right? So if he's saying, I'm going to end wars, but you're bringing in Pompeo to your administration, what does that mean? Do you trust them on this?
Well, let me say this. There's a huge movement amongst, you can't go on social media. In fact, Leo Terrell, not necessarily a big fan of him, put out there yesterday, I'm making a list of people who should not be in the Trump administration. Donald Trump Jr. immediately tweets back, get me that list. Thousands. You can go and read this tweet. Thousands of people, and the number one person on there is Mike Pompeo, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pompeo. Nobody in this party, everybody sees Mike Pompeo for being who he is. And people are outright not afraid to say, keep Mike Pompeo out of this administration. I am hoping that we can keep this from happening. Yes, he was at the last rally. Yes, even Trump called him that he had lost weight. I don't know what that was. I will tell you, just like him not issuing a pardon for WikiLeaks on his way out, Trump will go on and he will almost sentence his own administration to death if he puts Pompeo in there. I think you will lose almost out of the gate the support of the people that got him to where it is. Everybody can see Pompeo. There's a long list of names of people they want. We're also calling for a new head of the Senate. Obviously, they want Mitch McConnell gone. Republicans do. They are saying Rick Scott is that's one of the names still looking for others. I'm hearing Thomas Massey, who I absolutely adore, just won re-election, is going to be Secretary of Agriculture. That could be interesting. I actually like him in the House. I like him being a disruptor, but there's certain people that I think that I'm hoping this go around, he's going to be intelligent and actually put into office people who believe. I'm also, I'm a huge pusher for Tulsi Gabbard to be Secretary of Defense. I'm a big pusher, and people have mixed reviews about him, but I'm in Tennessee. I know Senator Haggerty. I know the people he has around him. I'm a big pusher for Senator Haggerty to be the Secretary of State. I think he is definitely someone, especially now that his kids are the same age as my kids. He doesn't want his kid being shipped off in a draft either. So we've had those conversations. So he knows that the majority of people do not want us to have any more foreign engagement. I think I'm hoping that I'm going to see the right, and it helps when you have people like RFK, Tucker Carlson, even Dana, Joe Rogan. When you have those folks in his ears and Trump's ears talking about who his cabinet is going to be, until we get it, I'm still optimistic. I think at this stage, the American people, Mike Pompeo, though, is the number one person that conservatives have identified does not need to be anywhere near, except for maybe an invitation to a cocktail party, Donald Trump.
It's funny. Democrats have said stuff like, well, we need our own Joe Rogan, or we need our own Elon Musk. And what I don't think they get is like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan were Democrats.
Yeah.
Meaning these people were Democrats. Rogan was backing Bernie Sanders. And if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk was a Democrat himself.
Absolutely.
And they are pushed, like, from your point of view, do they just not get that they are pushing people out of the party, whether it's this war stuff, whether it's this free speech stuff? Like, they have fundamentally betrayed everything that was, a mainstay of the Democratic Party. Noam Chomsky, freedom of speech is for the speech you don't particularly like. Okay, that's not part of the Democratic Party anymore. These people who were anti-war, or at the very least skeptical of war, okay, that's not part of the Democratic Party anymore. I mean, keep in mind, they went after Trump because he was being conciliatory in regards to trying to bring down wars. So they attacked him for wanting to, bring down hostilities with Russia. They attacked him for trying to make deals with North Korea in order to end those hostilities. Any and every time he has taken an action to either put a war to bed, they've attacked him for it. So it's like, how have they moved this far where they have basically started losing these people? RFK was a Democrat.
The difference is, where are they making their money from? If they're making their money in private business, as you saw with Tesla and the cars and the development and the technology, if they're making in Joe Rogan with WWE, it's private. If they're making their money off of their own work, private business, private commerce, then they see how the overwhelming taxes, the government regulations, how it's affecting their ability to do business. And that's where they went. And then you add in as compared to those that make their money off of the government. Two different worlds. If you make your money off the government, then you want a bigger government. If you make your money off of private citizens, now granted, Elon Musk now has a lot of deals with the government.
Yeah, this was going to say Elon Musk makes most of his money off the government. So does Bezos.
Not initially. Initially, it was private. It was his cars, it was technology, it was that development. I mean, I don't see a bunch of government. I don't see a bunch of police cars being Teslas yet. His money was initially made. So he started their startup business. It was those that make their money off of, and Elon Musk backed Bernie in 2016. Exactly. But Bernie's message resonated. He just didn't put the action behind it. And I think that's where all of the Bernie Sanders people are kind of actually went over and voted for Donald Trump probably this time, because there was no action behind Bernie. People want to see that side of it. So I think that's more of the issues. They saw the overwhelming. Then you add in the social issue. It's funny. I have seen more and more, and this comes to the African, we can disagree about this, but a lot of people say that the Democrats underestimated the power of this men and women's sports and the transgender issue in the locker rooms, the transgender, that the adult males, Black, white, Hispanic, were very much enraged and engaged over that issues. And the Democrats did not do enough to address.
We don't disagree on this. I agree with you fully on this.
Yeah, that whether you agree with the issue or not, the majority of Democrats probably don't even agree with what's happening, but they did not effectively communicate The Republicans were allowed to make this their issue, and
Yeah.
Democrats did nothing about it. And a lot of people said that right there is one of the pushes that you saw, especially for fathers or those that were within that age, the 30, 40 something, that said, nope, I don't like where this is going, so I'm going to go to the other side.
But you're always going to have issues that you agree or disagree with the political party about that don't necessarily push you away from the party. Like, when Elon Musk talks about it, for example, he usually brings it up in the context of free speech, basically saying Democrats have gone insane. And him getting Twitter not being willing to restrain it in the way that YouTube or the way that Facebook was restrained, like taking off information, shadow banning, and everything else. When he wasn't willing to do that, they kicked him to the curb. Same thing with RFK. When RFK was putting out the stuff about vaccines, and again, he was a skeptic, but he was a skeptic because he was a lawyer that dealt with corporate law, and he just didn't trust these companies in general. Meaning, it didn't come from this notion of, I'm just a hippie who don't believe in this stuff. It came from him being a corporate lawyer dealing with these type of companies. Well, they didn't tolerate that. They kicked him to the curb. They called him everything but a child of God. Tulsi Gabbard, same thing. She wanted less war, especially in the context of Syria and some of these other regime change wars. They called her an aside puppet, kicked her out. Like, all of these people were Democrats. And for whatever particular reason, especially around the issue of free speech, same thing with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan will point out that speech by Kamala Harris, where she's like, we need to restrain free speech. We need to go after Twitter and these free speech institutions. John Kerry, we need to deal with free speech. That's a problem. Like, that is terrifying to me. Because the First Amendment is there for a very specific reason, that the government will say things that the government lie. And you need the ability to be able to call the government a liar, as opposed to having the government be able to put the screws to you when you do so. I don't know. I mean, the trans thing, yeah, fair enough. I agree with you on that. I don't want men in women's sports beating the hell out of women, after they transition. So fair enough. I get the sense, though, that it goes beyond that. And it goes to this thing of, I don't know if Democrats even know what Democrats are these days. I could be wrong.
Well, a lot of people say, like you said, it's because you had Kamala Harris, walking around with Liz Cheney, that she was trying to totally ignore her base, which was supposed to be a very progressive base. I don't necessarily consider it to be progressive. I think it's extremist, was with that whole crowd, and trying to get these moderates. But the moderates, it just was not. She still has to have an identity, and she was trying to pull off a Trump across all sides, but it was something new to her. So it doesn't. Nobody else could pull off what Trump has pulled off. Let me point out, there's no other Republican could do exactly what Trump has done with the money he's done, except for Trump, who has the background and the resources in the past. We will never see another Trump within the Republican Party ever again, based off it. So that's why I think he realizes, he knows he only has 4 years left. That's a great thing. He's not running for re-election. So he can go in there and say, you know what, I'm going to tear it all down and rebuild this like it should. That's kind of, I think, what people are hoping for.
Scottie Nell Hughes, political consultant, friend of the show. Scottie, where can people find you these days?
Well, at this point, hopefully taking a nap. But at Scottie Hughes on Twitter, and obviously, like I said, I'm on TikTok. So find me, Hughes in the house.
Scottie Nell Hughes. Thank you for this, Scottie. I really appreciate it. Always enjoy talking to you. Get some rest. I'll talk to you in a few. Have a good one. Thank you. All right. We have the one and only Garland Nixon here. How are you doing, my man? How you doing, Garland?
Wonderful, wonderful. There we go. I was feeling kind of short there for a minute, but I think I got that straight guy.
No, you're looking perfect. You're looking perfect. Looking sharp today.
Look, I got on my Steve Porkinen gave me my in the damn wars. I'm ready for that. I'm ready for action.
The first thing in the first speech that Donald Trump gave was basically, we need to stop these wars. Do you believe him on that? I mean, especially with people like Pompeo sniffing around the administration, do you believe that he's legitimate and serious about trying to put an end to these wars and not starting new ones?
I do, for a number of reasons. One of them I'll give is, Donald Trump is a guy who, hilarious thing. If nothing else, he's funny, right?
Yeah.
He always starts off with, nobody's ever done anything like this. Nobody's ever achieved anything like He started off, look at this movement. Nobody's ever seen anything like this, right? But in that context, one of the things Donald Trump talked about, and people talked about, there was never any wars under him, right? No
Right.
new wars. We could nuance that one a bit. But
Yeah.
my point is this: I think Donald Trump took that as kind of a badge of honor. I think he took that as, this is something that separates me from everybody else. There's nothing more attractive to Donald Trump than separating himself from all the, nobody did what I did. Nobody's ever seen a guy who didn't start wars. So I think because of his emotional makeup, maybe it benefits us all, because him seeing that as his flag, his badge of honor, I'm the one that didn't start wars. I think he comes in saying, watch this. Joe Biden started all the wars. He did all this. I'll end them all. And then everybody will say, Trump could do that. Nobody could do that. So anyway, you get my point.
Yeah. I look, from your mouth to God's ears. Like I said, I genuinely, that was him talking about the war stuff was the one thing that I definitely wanted him to hit harder and hit more significantly. And he used to hit it in kind of oblique way. Like he would, Kamala Harris might say something like, well, he's hanging out with dictators. Well, what you mean by that is, well, he was willing to talk to Kim Jong-un in order to bring down hostilities in North Korea, or he was willing to, pull us out of Afghanistan, or he was willing to end Obama's regime change war in Syria. That's what she means when she says that. Basically, she's attacking him for being willing to bring down hostilities, which is just outrageous. Like, the Democratic Party has fundamentally shifted on their axis. And as I was telling Scottie, like, when you go down the Democrats, for example, you get Kamala Harris saying we need to do something about Twitter because it's free speech. You get John Kerry saying we need to do something about the First Amendment because it's a problem. You get Hillary Clinton saying she wants to put people in jail for misinformation, which is just super ironic coming from a Hillary Clinton. You get Whoopi Goldberg in The View effectively saying, well, because Donald Trump won, we need to do something about social media, and we need to restrain social media because, they're giving people information that is getting Trump elected. Give me your take on this. Have they just functionally gone insane on this issue of free speech because they don't necessarily have the levels of power or control anymore where they can control what people are thinking? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, a couple of things. No, the first thing is two of the things. So the first thing that you touched on, and I think it's important, and that is this business. Donald Trump talks to dictators, and he comes up with dictators, right? Okay. I think what they're really saying there is Donald Trump refuses to go with the imperial narrative, because the imperial narrative is, number one, you labeled your adversary a dictator, right? Number two, since they're a dictator, you can't talk to them. They're madmen. They're crazy. They're irrational. Therefore, so that creates a dynamic where once you say, fill in the blank, Jamal Thomas is a dictator, I can't go on his show anymore. Right. I can't talk to him. It is a way of stopping diplomacy, blocking all diplomacy. That person's a dictator. That's another way of saying he's a demon. He's crazy. He's a madman. And Donald Trump says, be it what it is, dictator, schmictator, call him what you want. And this is logical. Yeah, we need to talk to this person. And so, and what he wants, and it's so he does something that's even worse. You label him a dictator, therefore we can't talk to him, meaning he's crazy, he's a madman. And Donald Trump says, okay, he's a dictator, he's a tough guy, and you're weak. I can talk to him because I'm a tough guy too. So therefore, we don't need you in charge. You're too weak. To be quite frank, Donald Trump is really good. It's the Worldwide Wrestling Federation argument stuff that he used to do, the WWF, right? I'm gonna take your argument and turn it inside down and hit you over the inside out, hit you over the head. It is, he's a dictator, he's a bad guy, we can't talk to him. And Trump said, yeah, he's a bad guy, and I'm just as bad. He's a badass tough guy. Now you're weak, you're scared of badass tough guys. I ain't, because I'm a badass tough guy too, and I can talk to him. He'll listen to me. In fact, I respect the badass tough guy because I'm one. To a lot of, if you think about it, to the macho kind of guy, is like, you know what? Yeah, I like that. You know what I mean? A lot of people now see that as some kind of a powerful leader who says, I'm tough, I'm a leader. And they're like, particularly now, because things are going to hell in every direction. Right. And so people want somebody who's going to have a steady hand on the wheel, right? So a lot of times when you say, well, we've got to have some egghead intellectual, and people are like, man, I'd rather have somebody that can put a steady hand on the wheel and charge forward, and you know what I mean? So they created a dynamic, I think, that Donald Trump was able to massage that dynamic a little bit and make him more attractive. And I forgot what the second thing you were asking about. Oh, have they lost their minds when it comes to censorship and all?
They seem to have lost their minds.
It is.
Yeah, they seem to have lost their minds. I mean, like I've never seen this assault on free speech in this way. I mean, keep in mind, it's the Biden administration that went after RT, Sputnik, that did the end run around the Constitution when they were basically trying to get Twitter in order to blacklist various people. And I imagine the same thing is taking place with YouTube, or for that matter, Facebook. Like even Nina Jankowicz with the Mary Poppins, that was going to be the Ministry of Truth. Like, this stuff is a broadside on trying to effectively control social media and the conversations that take place on social media. And I would add one last point. Under no situation would they have called anything that the government did misinformation. So if the government came out and lied, they would say, well, that is true, and anything that contradicts that lie is effectively misinformation. Like I don't think people realize how terrifying that is, but liberals think it's perfectly okay.
I think this. I think they have so ingrained into the minds of the liberal intelligentsia, as it were, the great prophets of liberalism on CNN and MSNBC and throughout academia, that it is that it is necessary to control what the masses hear and see and say, that it has become part of their culture.
Yeah.
That they can't get out from under it because it is now part of their culture. And it has now become like a reactionary thing. There's a problem. I stubbed my toe. Oh, we got to shut somebody down. Can't talk about that. Oh, we lost a race. Oh, well, if we would just have censored more, we wouldn't have lost. Fake information's getting out. Oh, well, this bad happened. It's like now the automatic reaction to everything that goes in a way that they don't think it should go. Their reaction is always, we should have censored more. We had shut down fake news, blah, blah, blah. So much now that at first it was a tool that they use to control things. And now it's a tool that controls them, and they can't get out from under it. That's the reaction. It's amazing. They lost. The one thing they can't do is introspection. As soon as they lost, they can't look ever. The Democratic Party cannot look in the mirror and say, what did we do wrong? What do they say? This group over here, white, male, black, blue, they got to divide up into all these little groups and point out the demographic that didn't support them. But what they can never do is say, is it possible that we could have done something differently? Is it possible there could be blame there? And so create the discussion of who didn't support them and how that hurt them. Actually, as long as you're having that discussion, it's somebody else's fault.
Yep. Man, I made the exact same argument that it going with this idea that, well, we're the intellectuals. It's just misinformation, which is the reason why people are voting for somebody else. They're sexist, racist, and bigoted. It insulates you from reality, right? It insulates you from having to do any kind of real level of introspection or having an autopsy to figure out, why are we disliked? Like, how did a billionaire win the hearts of the working class, whereas the Democrats, who's supposed to be the party of unions, gets considered to be the elitists? And they have no answer for that at all. In fact, I want you to hear the way they were talking about it. This is Joy Ann Reid. Joy Ann Reid has a theory of the case. And I want you to get your take on her theory of the case. Let's see. This, and this.
Anyone who has experienced or been in the United States for any period of time and experienced this country's history and knows it cannot have believed that it would be easy to elect a woman president, let alone a woman of color. Let's just be clear. And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swift to the Swifties.
It was a historic campaign, Garland. I mean, for God's sake, she even had the Swifties. She had Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah doesn't endorse anybody. So how on earth could this flawless, historic, perfect campaign ever lose? Just fascinated, because what she's saying there basically is, well, it was a flawless campaign, which means by definition, either it was impossible for her to win, or it was something else other than the campaign, because the campaign was flawless. So it had to be a race or sex.
Yeah, what's interesting, she started off kind of with her premise about, sexism and racism and a woman president, right? That's the only conversation we can have. And then she went on to say, we did everything right. So, which means, here's the thing. If I did everything right, then it has to be your fault. It has to be fault outside of, as soon as I say I did everything right, then it has to be, somebody else's fault. It is simply a way of setting up an intellectual dynamic where the only conversation we can have is how everybody else screwed us, because it's not possible that we could have made an error. And also it kind of reminds me, I'll take it to foreign policy, to the Ukraine stuff. When the Ukraine's going bad, they say, okay, we're going to come up with a plan to present to Russia. What is the plan? Russia gives us Crimea and everything else back, and they, surrender Putin, and this whole steps down. But you know what I mean? It's one of these things that within your little group, hey, that's great. But outside of the group, everybody's looking at you like you're nuts. So it's like she's sitting in that little group, right? And she's saying, we're good, we're smart, we're perfect. And they're all going like this.
Yeah, they're shaking their heads. Yeah.
Right. Oh, we're good. We're smart. We're perfect. Blah, blah, blah. No. And now let's go give Putin this. And everybody's like, within your group, it makes sense. But outside, they're just so insular. Yeah. They have lost the capacity for introspection, for honest evaluation of what they're doing. Because if they do that, they got to change. I'll add one more thing. There is one way out for the Democrats. It's 4 years away. But there's one way out that they can't possibly do. And you know what that is? Have a plain old open primary and let the people choose. Right? But this is a result of 2020. You robbed Bernie Sanders and you lost. I was a Democrat. And you ran people like me completely out of the party in 2016, right? A whole group. Then 2020, you did what you had to do, but you still robbed Bernie. You stole the Bernie. You come together on Super Tuesday and you manipulate Obama. And so a big part of this is stealing the election, the primaries from your people 2 times in a row. You got no trust, no respect, no nothing. And see, the people now, they want something different, but they have now learned that there is no possibility they can get it within their own party. So I always go back to what Malcolm X said when you ask the field slave to run away. Their life is so miserable. The answer is any place is better than here. And that's where people in the Democratic Party are. Oh my God, Dick Cheney, wars. Oh God, any place is better than here. If they were, think about it. If they were in 2028 to say, you know what, we're have open primary. Let the chips fall where they may. And the people chose, they'd have a chance, but they can't do that. Now, can they?
Well, that's the rub, right? And that's one of the other conversations that's starting to bubble up on whose fault. Like, look, personally, I think a lot of the blame lies with Kamala Harris, because if you look at it, if you're looking at the polling, she goes all the way until October with basically a 2-point lead, and then she falls off of a cliff. By the time she gets like October 20th or something like that. So she had chances. It wasn't like, it was a foregone conclusion all the way through. People were racist, sexist, and didn't give her a chance. It wasn't that. On the other side of it, there's a question about Joe Biden, that Joe Biden calls himself a transient candidate. And instead of being the transient candidate that stepped down, he decided that he was going to run again. He ends up being completely out of it and incapable of doing so, in which case Kamala Harris is thrown into the kind of the lion's den with a month or 2 months to run and start a campaign. This is without a primary, without being vetted, without them finding who's the strongest candidate, without having the kind of democratic ideals and everything else pushed out to the American public, without her even being inoculated from the worst aspects of her own campaign. Like, so there's a question about Joe Biden. Simone Sanders brought this up. What do you think about that? I mean, granted, I guess blame could be lied in multiple places. But do you think Joe Biden is going to share, like when history looks back at this, share a large share of the responsibility for her losing this race?
Well, you know what? I take it a little broader. I hope I'm not going too broad for people, but I take it a little broader. I go back to 20. This is a policy problem. 2020, they decided we don't care. Joe Biden was a flop. Kamala
Yeah.
Harris was a flop, but they decided we're going to do. In fact, one of the Democrats even went on CNN and said, we selected Joe Biden, not to beat Trump, but to beat Bernie, right? So at
That's
the
true.
time, remember
That's so
that they
true.
didn't care if Joe Biden at the time, let's face it, in 2020, do you remember Julio Castro or whatever his name was running? And he mentioned Joe Biden's mental
Issues. Yeah.
security issues, and they ripped him apart.
Yep.
And he was like, hey, guys, it's true. Come on here, right? So they knew he couldn't do it, but they did it to take out Bernie with no concern about whether or not he was a good candidate, whether or not he was capable of doing the job. Who cares? So they stick this guy in there. Then they pick Kamala Harris, who at the time had just embarrassed herself, but they're like, but she's a black female, blah, blah, blah. We'll stick her in there again. No concern for ability, knowledge, charisma, anything that would be attractive to the voters, right?
Yeah.
They stick these people in there and then they wonder why this blows up in their face. You knew that you had people who were really bad candidates, but you didn't really care because you just wanted to beat Bernie. And then you just wanted to play this identity politics crap and you stuck them in there. I don't blame Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
If you put Garland or Jamal in charge of the party and they come up to us and they say, all right, we're going to make her the vice president, we look at her and we say, now you can't do that because we need somebody who's going to present a little better. Nothing.
Right.
We don't want to talk bad about her and all. She seems like a nice enough person, but that's not going to work. Let's look in some other direction. That's what we would do. Right.
Yeah.
You and I, neither one of us have like PhDs in, in political science or anything. We're just like, yeah, who's going to vote for her? That's not
a bad idea. Yeah.
Right. So can I blame her if she was stuck in a position? She was chosen for a position that she was not capable to, or capable of, or should I blame the people? Let me tell you, and I don't know, you may remember when they picked her, I said, if history is any indicator, she'll come out, and the concept, and I kept saying this, the concept of Kamala Harris, an attractive woman,
right?
She's a minority, she's a former lawyer, blah, blah, blah. The concept of her is very attractive to voters. But the actual persona of Kamala Harris, when you hear her talk and her rhetorical capacity and things of that nature are really bad. So she's going to come out looking good, just like she did in 2020, and then she's going to bottom out quickly. That's exactly what happened. It was easily predictable here. So I don't blame her. She did what she was capable of. The people in charge had to look at that and say, yeah, I don't think we can push this one through. Even, how about this? Even her numbers as vice president indicated that she was going to get blown out. Her numbers, if you look at her numbers as vice president, those numbers say she's going to get blown out as a presidential candidate. The worst vice presidential numbers ever. Of course, she's going to get blown out. You have to say, nah, we can't do this because let's see, we may get blown out. And then they get blown out. Oh my God, it's the fault of the voters.
Yeah. I mean, because they went around saying, well, black men weren't sufficiently loyal. I think they called black men and Hispanic men racist and misogynist. They blame everybody else accepting any level of responsibility for losing. I've never seen anything like it. Like even when Hillary Clinton lost, it was blacks were insufficiently loyal. Russia got involved. Comey got involved. Iran might have been looking at us a particular way. It rained that morning. I mean, any little thing they would basically use and throw into it. I guess the question becomes now that they've lost in what seems to be a landslide, what happens to the Democratic Party? Meaning, what the hell is the Democratic Party now? Who are the leaders of the party at this point? Considering Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were not really loved. They were just placeholders. Like it wasn't like an Obama, or it wasn't like a Trump or a Bernie, where they had movements, they had things that they wanted to accomplish. This was different. These felt like just they were there. What happens to the Democratic Party now?
You just like triggered a thought in my mind that makes sense. Okay. Traditional conservatism is conserve things, conserve traditions, keep things the same, right? Yes. And progressivism is supposed to be change and look for something new and how can we make things better, right? But what we've just determined is that the Democratic Party is extremely conservative. And here's what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're making this argument that it wasn't our fault, we didn't do anything wrong, there's no reason to change. You shouldn't
Right.
change, right? So their argument, really, the argument of the Democratic elite is it wasn't our fault. There's nothing we can do to change because these stupid voters won't do what they're supposed to do. We don't. So now, aren't they making an argument against change, a constant argument against change, to say there's nothing we can do? The voters, you know what they're going to say? Well, of course, we went too far to the left. I mean, that's a given. But they're going to say we need to change our messaging. It's our messaging. And of course, we got to censorship more. That's a given. But we got to change our messaging because we've got to explain to the poor, stupid, ignorant, the uneducated populace out here the error of their ways and why we're better off for them and blah, blah, blah. And then we'll surely win once we get these poor, the hoi polloi out here. Once we get them to understand how great we are, well, they'll turn right around. So bottom line is the dynamic is set for them to continue to do the same. And just,
Well,
it's pathetic.
Well, as you pointed out that they were going to blame the left, sharing the screen. Harris' defeat is a stinging verdict for the left. For Harris, who's no stranger to setbacks, the presidential election result was a devastating defeat. But notice that they're blaming the left. And by the way, they do the same thing with AOC. AOC capes for this party constantly. And yet, when the Kamala Harris thing comes up, the first thing they're going to say is, well, Kamala Harris was catering to the left, and this is not something that you could do. It's outrageous when they do this nonsense. Kamala Harris is not the left. And yet, that's the label that they put on her. And when they put that label on her, they basically try to say, well, left-wing candidates can't run, and they're bad at running.
Well, you're right. And that was part of that was the game of shifting to the Cheney and all of that stuff. It was we've gone too far to the left, and now we can go out and get these Republicans. Cheney lost in a landslide. Liz Cheney lost in a landslide. So you go get a person that in her own party lost in a landslide to go attract people from her party, the party that rejected her in a landslide. Again, none of this stuff is logical, but here's part of it. One of the things that the U.S. empire has tried to do to get rid of the left is to redefine the left, right? And the Republicans go along with them. So they say, we went too far to the left. And the Republicans say, yeah, you lost because you went too far to the left. Who is the left? You redefine the left as cultural issues. The left is no longer, we think that workers should come together in unions. The left is no longer anti-war. The left is no longer, we don't trust corporations. That used to be the left.
Yeah.
But now the left is something about trans rights or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. You have something to do with, we support women or something or whatever, right? It's not real. But this phony platitudes about Black or indigenous people of color, BIPOCs, you make up stuff like that. And now you are a lefty if you're like, yes, I saw a chewing gum commercial yesterday, and it had a Black guy, a white guy, a Muslim, an Asian, a gay couple. There's like now 50 people in a chewing gum advertisement because they're afraid they may miss one of the demographics. Instead of just like, one person shoving a piece of Doublemint in their friggin' yap. Yeah. They gotta have have you noticed these advertisements, this huge crowd of people. Yeah. And as they go person to person in the crowd, there's an Asian, someone has a hijab, there's this. That is now the left. As you're pro-war, as Hollywood, they're hugging, literally pinning medals on Nazis.
Yeah.
But you can still be the left. You can hug a Nazi. Used to be punch a Nazi. You can hug a Nazi and still be the left as long as you also hug a trans person. A Nazi and a trans person. In fact, they had a Nazi trans person as the spokesperson for Ukraine. Remember that? That was the ultimate, a trans Nazi. That's you go. That's Hollywood. That's Democratic Party.
By the way, they did this Martin Luther King. Like they ignore the socialist part and they just talk about, he was fighting for civil rights, missing the fact that the guy was a socialist. And he was pushing for increased wages and those type of things. They completely deprioritize those things. And I suspect part of the reason that the Democratic Party does that is because they're stuck with a contradiction. A, they need to get money to win elections. And B, the people that are on the left are somewhat skeptical of that money because they know that money is effectively exerting a certain amount of control over the politics. And so from their point of view, we need to deprioritize money and finance in regards to what it means to be the left. And if we could say, well, this is about you being, white, black, gay, straight, some particular demographic, then we can focus on that demographic. We can hire somebody that's in that demographic, and we can ignore all of the economic issues and just say, this person is going to represent you. They have gotten that down to a science for the last 20, 30 years.
And what's happening is too, and this is the big part, when people are doing okay, you might get away with that.
Yeah.
But now that the material circumstances of the working class has begun to deteriorate, people are more desperate, right? And so now they got to hear something. It's like, hey, I got whatever, a wife and 2.5 kids in a minivan, and I can't afford, the normal. My kid needs new soccer cleats, and I need tires, and geez, I can't afford what I'm paying at the grocery store monthly and all of this. Okay, at that point, all of these esoteric discussions about democracy and things that I'm not even really sure what the hell it is are not as important as I got to buy tires, and I just looked at my check, and I don't know how I'm going to my tires, banana peels, and I'm going to have to use my credit card to do it, and I'm up to my ears in debt, and I don't really want to hear about democracy and DEI, none of that stuff. I don't even want to discuss that. Who's going to do something to address the deterioration of my
situation,
economic situation? Yeah, exactly. And so they, any port in a storm. And when Trump says, at least he says it, he'll do it whether he can do it. They don't care. They're like, look, you're saying let's fight for democracy in Nagorno-Karabakh or some country.
Right.
And this guy at least says, hey, let's do something to, put a few more beans in your pocket. And this is what kills me. People have said to me, I don't know how many times, yeah, when Trump, we don't know what it's going to be like when Trump gets in office. And I'm like, well, we really kind of do.
He was president once
for 4 years, and you can look at it and say, man, that was crap there, that was crap there, that wasn't crap there, that wasn't crap there. So you can't really scare the people with Trump like you could with somebody else, because they got 4 years and they're like, if the worst I got to deal with is some mean tweets and a boneheaded thing every now and then, I can't even do a mean tweet myself now. It's censored.
Garland, man. Oh, there we are. Garland, man, I deeply appreciate you joining me, man. I always have fun with you. The audience always loves you. Garland Nixon, he is a political analyst. In fact, this bio is going to have to change. So many things have changed on this. Garland, let's just do it this way. Political analyst, great friend of the show. Where can people find you?
Just basically at Garland in on Telegram. Look me up on YouTube, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram. Just look up Garland Nixon. There ain't a whole lot of them. but
you have a channel also, I thought, right?
Yeah. What's that? Yeah, I got my YouTube, Rockfin, and Rumble. Yeah.
Definitely check him out. Garland Nixon, man. He got me started in radio, and he has my deepest appreciation forever for that. Thank you, Garland, man. Have a good one, man.
All right,
guys. I am going to take a quick break. I'm going to rest just for a minute or two. I'm going to be back. The FBI has decided to wind down the cases against Donald Trump. Now, what does this mean? And what's wild about it, it's kind of interesting that the moment that the election is over with and Trump wins, it's like, all right, we got to wind this down now. It served its purpose. It did its job. That job being, we need to beat him up before he gets into office, and ideally, if we can, put him in a cage to prevent him from getting into office. When Joe Biden went out and said Donald Trump needs to be in jail, why do you think he said that? After all, the Justice Department definitely tried to, whether it was in Atlanta, whether it was in that bogus nonsense case that was in New York, they did everything in their power to do so. And I strongly suspect that some of that stuff is going to be rolled back because of how egregious it was, especially the case in New York. So let's take a quick break. I am going to bring on Rory. Rory is she's apolitical. She's fantastic. And she tends to go into these issues for us, giving an explanation on what is going on. And she's great in the sense that it's not giving you a political spin for it. It's just the facts, man. She's fantastic at that. I appreciate her joining me to do so. So I'm going to take a quick break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. If you guys dig the content, like it, share it, subscribe to it, hit the notification bell. If you really dig the content, you can always help through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, a super chat. All chats will be read. I will read it at the end of the show, at the point where Rory finishes, and we finish our interview. So I'm going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment. Rory, there you are. Okay. Okay, this is a quick break because Rory is here. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hold on, I can't hear you
today? There we are. How are you doing today? You doing all right? Can you hear me all right?
Marl, I can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me now? Still can't hear me. Let's see. The audio is on. 1 second. No, audio is on. And I can hear you. What's going on? What's going on? Let's see. Okay,
Hello?
how about now? Still can't hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, I think there may be something.
One second.
Okay, all right. How about now, Roy? Can you hear me? I can hear you just fine, but you can't hear me. It has to be your speakers. Still can't hear me? Roy, still can't hear me?
Yeah.
I'm
I'm sorry, I still can't hear a word you're saying. Do you want me to
Well, I can
sign
hear
out
you
and sign
just
back in again?
fine, but you can't hear me. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to pull you out. And, well, all right. We are having a bit of technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on with Rory and her setup, but for whatever reason, she could not hear me. I don't think that's me because everybody else I didn't have any issue with. And we've had a full show today, so I don't think it's that. But let's move on. If she comes back, we could try it again. Okay, Rory, can you hear me now? Still?
Yeah, still nothing. Sorry.
Okay. Let's try with it. Oh, you can't hear me. You can't hear me. Okay. Let's try with a different setup. Okay, Rory. All right. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, well, we can't. I can hear her, but she can't hear me, which is kind of the issue. Give me 1 second, guys. 1 second, 1 second. Okay. Rory, can we try? Can we? Okay, can we try? 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. Can we try Zoom tomorrow? Okay, I'm going to see if we can do Zoom or something like that tomorrow. And we will do it that way. Because I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure what else to do. Okay, to remove from studio if you want to prevent the person. No, she's not banned. Okay. All right, so let's do this. Let's continue on with the show. And I'm going to see if we can get Rory using a different setup tomorrow. It may even be Skype or something like that. And we will just go from there. Okay, perfect. She said yes. All right. I want to show something else then. Let's go into another segment. Let's go into another segment. Simone Sanders. Simone Sanders. Now, if you remember, Simone Sanders used to work with the Bernie Sanders campaign. And she was eventually moved from Sanders, and if I'm not mistaken, went to Clinton. I could be wrong, either Clinton or Biden. I don't remember exactly which one. But she basically switched. She, upped her profile. All right. She ends up getting a show on MSNBC. Now, from all accounts and people who have talked about the show, it is not necessarily the most entertaining show in the world. My mama said you shouldn't say bad things about people, so I'm not going to say anything bad about it. I'm just going to say people have said it's not necessarily the most entertaining or the most engaging. So there's that. Now, as we have been watching liberals freak out over the past few days, some of the funniest freaking out has been what has been taking place on like MSNBC, some cases CNN, whether it's Jonathan Capehart, who is completely bewildered by Donald Trump losing or Donald Trump winning, or the members of The View who had some serious meltdowns. Whoopi Goldberg starts to show off, look like she's in tears. Behart gives this moving speech about keeping a stiff upper lip and keeping on moving and accepting the results of the election, even if you don't like them. By the same token, there needs to be something done to social media because, people have too much information and they have too much free speech. Free speech is an issue with liberals. This, again, I've showed this before, but I get a kick out of it every time I see it because it's the funniest thing in the world to me. The meltdowns.
How did we get here? What in the Alice in Wonderland nightmares is going on right now? All I can say is how fucking dare you? If you voted for that man, if you voted for anybody other than Kamala and you live in one of the states that it was, close, or if you didn't vote, fuck you. Go Kamala. I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. I love you. How the fuck is this still happening? All I've ever known.
I chose family. I chose women. I chose America. That is the funniest clip in the world. I think my favorite out of all of these clips and all of these meltdowns is just righteous anger, just righteous indignation. Listen to this guy just lose it, flip out when Kamala Harris, and it's clear that Kamala Harris lost.
She's gonna win this fucking thing. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm so pissed off. I can't believe Trump's actually gonna win this fucking thing. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm so pissed off. God damn it.
They're not handling it all that well. They're not handling this all that well. Simone Sanders on MSNBC, they also had a bit of a tiff. And in the tiff that Simone Sanders went with, listen to what she says in this. And I guess the question becomes, is she right? Is Simone Sanders right? Because when people look back on this race, one of the things that they're going to bring up, one of the things they're going to mention beyond the race that Kamala Harris ran and whether or not it was her fault, whether or not she had the capacity to win, all of that stuff. I think the people on MSNBC, Joy and Reed, is wrong. I don't think it had anything to do with a race or sex. I think it had to do with her theory of the case. As I've pointed out before, you get 70 to 80, 72% of the country, so they're angry or they're dissatisfied with the state of the country. 72%. And again, not just a bit annoyed, angry at the condition of the country. Those people voted for Donald Trump. Now, if that is the stat, and there are other stats that go from, let's say, 60 to 80%, and you tell people that I can't tell you what different I would have done than Joe Biden, the person who was in charge when they were being unhappy or as they became unhappy, or I can't tell you anything that I would do different going forward, then your theory of the case that you are a change candidate falls flat on its face, meaning you have contradicted yourself. You've contradicted your main theory of the case for why they should put you in that office. And from my point of view, when you're looking at the polling, and she's in lead by 2 points nationally, going all the way up until like October 20th or something like that, and she falls off a cliff. Now, as Garland pointed out, it's not that people love Trump. It's more so that people were willing to accept Trump as being something different. And even on the foreign policy standpoint, you have one candidate that's deriding a candidate for wanting to get us out of wars. Think about that. Now, I would have preferred Donald Trump had a big fight over this, meaning on a debate stage where he is going after her for basically being a war hawk. He didn't necessarily do that, but it became very clear that her attacks on him had more to do with, well, he wants to settle the war in Ukraine. He wants to sit and talk to Kim Jong-un. He's hanging and palling around with dictators. It becomes that. And I think if you talk to the American public and said, hey, are you sick of these wars? Are you sick of spending nearly $300 billion in Ukraine, purely a geopolitical expansion of the U.S. power? Are you sick of that? Are you really okay with Israel committing a genocide? Are you really okay with that? And you get a candidate that finally says, I am going to end wars, not start them. Now, whether he's serious about that or not, who knows? I have zero idea. I do know that one of his first campaign speeches, he mentioned it, he said it. And I guess at a certain point, if you're going to hit it real hard, you're kind of stuck with whatever you come out with. Who knows? I don't know. It's very possible that Netanyahu drags America into a larger war with Iran. I mean, after all, especially if you're going to give him a blank check in the same way that Joe Biden gave Netanyahu a blank check. But understand, Joe Biden also would have gotten dragged into that war if that's the case. It's not like there's a dramatic difference between the two. I guess the only difference is one grumbles and the other one does it gleefully, but it still gets done. This is Simone Sanders when she's talking about basically the way they treated Joe Biden, because this argument is going twofold. In one sense, the argument is Joe Biden was a transitional candidate. He should have stepped down right off the bat. He said he was going to do 1 year. He was already too old for the job. He should have taken that 1 year, called it a day, let them have their primary, and let the strongest candidate win. There's that argument. The other argument is you guys put a knife in Joe Biden thinking that he was the weaker candidate. And ultimately, he was not the weaker candidate. It was Kamala Harris. And so when you guys spent all of those weeks putting a knife in him and stabbing him, that damaged the look of the party, that damaged the party in general, and it damaged Kamala Harris's campaign. That's the thought. That's the thought. So let's hear Simone Sanders and let's get her take. And I want to see whether you think she is correct.
Of some of the strategy, and again, the people that said Joe Biden was the problem. Where's my camera? He was not the solution. I will just note that it is probably not the best idea that Democrats orchestrated a very public stab fest, a proverbial stabbing in the front of the sitting president of the United States of America, and they didn't use him in his hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. I will defer to Mr. Lewis. But I do have an indictment of some of the strategy. And again, the people that said Joe Biden was the problem. Where's my camera?
He was not the solution.
I will just note that it is probably not the best idea that Democrats orchestrated a very public stab fest, a proverbial stabbing in the front of the sitting president of the United States of America, and then didn't use him in his hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania. I will defer to Mr. Lewis.
Does she have a point? Does she have a point? Now, if you remember, Kamala Harris went with the argument that effectively Joe Biden was an albatross, that much of the reporting, especially that was coming out of Axios, said something to the effect that Kamala Harris was trying to keep Joe Biden at arm's length, not just arm's length. When Joe Biden said something like, I'm going to Pennsylvania, I'm going to Pittsburgh. And they looked and like, what? What do you mean he's going to Pittsburgh? What the hell is he talking about? Going to Pittsburgh for who? For what reason? Meaning the campaign has decided that Joe Biden was a problem and that Joe Biden was dragging down Harris's numbers. Now, Sanders' point is, A, he put a knife in the guy. He won the primary. She didn't win anything. You had a public flogging of Joe Biden, of the sitting president. There's that. That fundamentally diminished Joe Biden's power going forward, meaning Joe Biden was fundamentally invisible after that happened. 2, you lost Pennsylvania. I mean, like, severely lost Pennsylvania. All right. So in losing Pennsylvania, 50.5 to 48.5. You lost it by what? 100,000 votes, give or take. Would Joe Biden have moved the needle in that situation? That's her point. That whether you think Joe Biden was a liability or not is secondary to the point that Joe Biden came from Scranton, Pennsylvania, that the class of people that you needed, this kind of white working class voter, the Joe Rogan crowd, if you want to call it that Joe Biden spoke to those people, that he is a white working class whisperer, and that he would have had some capability of making up the gap that Kamala Harris had in Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know if that's true. I mean, the reality of it is the blue wall utterly and fundamentally collapsed. Michigan used to be a Democratic place. Wisconsin. Michigan used to be a Democrat place, stronghold. Pennsylvania was a Democratic stronghold for like 50 years. Collapsed. In my map, I gave Nevada and Arizona to Trump. I mean, right now they have him at how many votes? 295. Well, the moment he gets these two, this is going to push it well over 300. That's a landslide. Whatever you think of him, that is a landslide. And as I kept pointing out before, there was never going to be a situation where Donald Trump wins the presidency, and then those people who go and vote Trump, especially after winning the popular vote, those people who go vote Trump turn around and then vote a Democrat in either the House or the Senate. I couldn't see it happening. And so, from my understanding, they took the Senate, and I don't know if they've taken the House yet, but as much, I would wager that they're probably also going to take the House. Also, I want to point something else out. There are 320 million people in this country, give or take. Half of the country didn't vote. So when Democrats are running around screaming that blacks were insufficiently loyal, that Jill Stein was on the ballot, that Muslims and Arabs weren't loyal and they end up voting for Trump or voting for Jill Stein, when they say that Putin got involved and somehow affected the results of the election, when they come up with all of these excuses, just keep in mind that half of the country didn't vote. So instead of going after that half that didn't vote, instead of giving them something emancipatory to vote for. And Sanders came out and made a really good point. He said, you know, the Democrats can't necessarily be shocked that they lost the working class when they left the working class. I'm paraphrasing, but his point is, you did not run a campaign that was focused around workers and raising up the poor and the middle class. You ran a campaign where you got over $1 billion. And for all the talk about Donald Trump working with these billionaires, there were far more billionaires working for the Harris campaign, considering the amount of money that Harris got as compared to Trump. Trump only brought in $400 million. Put that in context. Harris doubled, if not tripled, what Donald Trump brought in regards to his coffers. And yet, landslide, mandate has even been thrown around. Mandate. I want to show something else. In the exit polling, when you look at who voted for who, it is fascinating. Because what it gets across is that people were damaged by this administration. And for all of the talk of the Biden economy, Bidenomics, we've lowered inflation, all of that ignores the fact that inflation had went up to like 9%. And whereas Biden said, this is transient, this is only going to be for a little while. Well, it wasn't transient in the context of staying for like 2 years. When they asked people, hey, in the past year, how did inflation affect your family? Now, the people who said they had no hardship, meaning we did fine, 77% voted for Harris. There were 24% that said there were no hardships. 75% said they were either severe or moderate hardships. The people who said they were severe hardships voted for Trump, 74%. The people who said they were moderate voted for Trump, 51%. They effectively they looked at it and said, she can't think of anything she would have done differently. She can't think of anything she will do differently. I believe that my pain is directly related to the Biden economy and Bidenomics, that Harris has said that she was in a room assisting in all of the decisions. And so from their point of view, they asked the question, am I better off today than I was 4 years ago? The people who were dealing with severe or moderate hardships overwhelmingly said no. And those people turned and voted Trump. I want to show another thing. The working class. Keep in mind, this was a demographic the Democratic Party basically had in spades. Education, never attended college, 63% voted for Trump. Some college, 51% voted Trump. Associate's degree, 55% voted Trump. So the people without degrees or with minor secondary education, the working class, voted for Trump. The people with degrees voted Democrat. They're so goddamn superior. That's their thought anyway, but they can't win a race. Here's another one. Where's this one? Yeah, I don't care about the View. There was another one. Associate's degree, pain in the family. Here's one. Feeling about the way things are going in the United States. 30% of angry. 43% are dissatisfied. So 73% of people are either angry or dissatisfied. The people who are angry voted Trump. The people who are dissatisfied voted Trump. The people who are satisfied and enthusiastic voted for Harris. So what you're seeing, and the trend that you're seeing, is the people who wanted continuity and wanted no change voted Harris. The people who were upset, wanted change, were damaged, were injured, voted Trump. They switch horses. Isn't that that's fascinating. Here's another one. Who do you think will trustfully handle the economy? No. Right here. Income. People making less than 30,000, that was 12%. 45% of them went to Trump. People who are making 30,000 to 49,000, 53%. Okay, so Harris, less than 30,000, 50% went to Harris. 30 to 49,000, 53% went to Trump. So a majority went to Trump. 50 to 99,000, 51% went to Trump. A majority went to Trump. Over 100,000. 53% went to Harris. So people who with uber incomes and with people with modest incomes went for Harris. Middle class fundamentally went for Trump. I guess my thing is there needs to be an honest assessment as to why. How is the party of unions getting beat by a blue-collared billionaire? Meaning the guy is literally a billionaire. He came down in a golden escalator. He flaunts his wealth left and right. And yet the Democratic Party, who's supposed to be the party of that same working class, gets considered to be elitist, above it all, arrogant, moralizing, meaning, this notion of you got to get your pronouns right and all this other stuff, basically badgering people about X or Y, and fundamentally looked at as being the party of either the rich or the elites. Whereas the billionaire, the actual billionaire, is considered the guy who's fighting for the working class. And to put a punctuation on this, the fact that Teamsters didn't endorse a Democrat because the majority would have voted for Trump is damning. It's just a damning indictment. Just a damning indictment. I'm going to end this by reading the chats. I'm going to say, guys, if you dig the content, like it, share it, subscribe to it, hit your notification bell. If you really dig the content, you can support the work through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. All chats will be read, providing they're not racist, bigoted, sexist, and they are typically read at the end of the show. Natalie Williams, my theory, Democrats lose on purpose, provides the excuse for never delivering duopoly theatrics. I don't know. They seem to be pretty terrified of Donald Trump, meaning they seem to have wanted to win that race. I've heard this argument before that they threw Kamala Harris out as a sacrificial lamb of some sorts, that they assumed that they were going to lose, so they threw Kamala Harris out because they didn't want to damage Gavin Newsom. I don't think I buy that. I mean, if you think of everything that they've done, they've tried to put him in a cage. The rhetoric went to this escalatory scale of calling him Hitler and fascist and calling his supporters Nazis, calling supporters garbage, meaning this stuff came out of a context. This is the way they were thinking. This is the way they addressed them. And the lawsuits, in and of itself, they were trying to take him off the game board. I don't think it was a situation where they basically were okay with him winning. I think they did everything in their power to get rid of him, and he just so happened to win. I could be wrong. Let's keep going. Dino Pedalokakis, keep up the great work, Jamal. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. I'm trying. Doing my damnedest. I'm Janice Anderson. Elon Musk also backed Bernie in 2016. Yes! Now, the Democratic Party is acting like Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, that these are bros. And these are bros in the point of being these kind of uber Republicans. These people were Democrats. These people were Democrats. Now, again, an honest assessment needs to be, why did we lose these people? How did we lose these people from the party? They would never ask that question because arrogance doesn't allow you to ask that question. I mean, after all, if you're morally superior, if you're brighter and more intelligent, then why do you need to investigate those things? Why do you need to question or have any level of introspection into it? Obviously, the only reason that you lost is because people are racist and sexist and bigoted. If they knew better, they would just vote for Democrat. That's the way they think. It's unfortunate. It's very insular. Let's keep going. D. Marie, love listening to Garland. Is there any chance the Trump administration would lift some of the sanctions against Russia so Sputnik could return? D. Marie, from your mouth to God's ears, I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, Donald Trump did point out that he wanted to get rid of some of the sanctions against Russia, but his argument was that it was hurting the dollar, that the dollar was being damaged by sanctions and by weaponizing of that dollar. And so his thought was, okay, we need to do something about it. By the same token, Donald Trump says some of everything. And I got to be honest, a lot of times in this race, he was somewhat incoherent. He was all over the place. So what he does, who knows? He may roll them back. He may leave them there. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that he's going to get that granular in rolling back sanctions, especially with the opposition that he may get with them screaming that he's a Putin puppet and he's working for the Russians. Now, that being said, the fact that he went through that once, he may have no fucks to give this time around. So he may bull his way through just from lessons learned in the past. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. Simone Sanders is already attempting to blame Biden. She's not entirely wrong, but she's the one of the many chefs that sat and watched the dish burn right along with everyone else in the DNC kitchen. Damn right. Damn right. I mean, in that moment, she's pointing out that, you guys put a knife in Biden in the very beginning. But again, many people have brought up this notion that Joe Biden should have remained a transitional candidate and stepped down and allowed a primary process to take place, as opposed to putting Kamala Harris in this kind of weird spot where you're throwing her in at the last few months. Also, understand the primary process would have allowed A, the strongest candidate, and B, even if that candidate ended up being Kamala Harris, her flaws, her weaknesses would have been aired out before you get into the finals. So it's not this thing where there's this massive drop at the very end. She would have been insulated on some level by the attacks that would have been leveled at her in that primary. That's assuming she would have made it through the primary. Keep in mind, the first time around, she couldn't make it through the primary. She didn't even make it to Iowa. It's very possible, in my theory of the case, in this, my hypothesis, is that Joe Biden might have started off as a transitional candidate, meaning he may have went into it thinking, I'm only going to do one term. There was a common knowledge, and I'm going to call it common knowledge because it seemed to be shared amongst most people, that Kamala Harris couldn't win on her own, that she was a bad candidate, that she was the invisible woman, and that she was roundly unlikable. And because she was roundly unlikable, that Joe Biden couldn't let her run it. Now, the only reason Joe Biden ends up stepping down is because he flamed out. He had the most catastrophic debate in the history of debates on this planet. Again, short of Joe Biden dying on stage. And I think even dying on stage would have been better than the way it ultimately turned out, because at that point, he would have been blissfully unaware of how bad it was. This situation was not that. He collapsed fully and people freaked out and was like, oh my God, that's not a deep fake. He just said they beat Medicare. And so you get a problem. Okay, what do we do with this? He clearly can't run. He's going to get beat in a landslide. He can't run. And so then it becomes, okay, well, who are we going to get? Are we going to have a primary process? Or are we going to have a mini primary, a truncated primary? Okay, how will we get a Gavin Newsom? How are we going to be able to step over the black woman in order to get the white guy? Meaning all of these things were somewhat practical issues that they were dealing with. And so they decided, we're not going to step over the black woman. We're going to go to war with the army we got as opposed to the army we want. And we're going to activate Kamala Harris as the VP. There were even issues associated with money, meaning it would have been difficult to give money to somebody else as opposed to giving somebody on the ticket. Since Harris was on the ticket, the money can be transferred to her. I think they had a practical issue. So with that practical issue, the thing becomes, all right, what do we do? Joe Biden is not up to snuff. And yet somebody has to run. Let's put in Kamala. Now, to be fair to Kamala, she did get a glow in the very beginning. She avoided interviews because they weren't pushing her to do interviews. And you can kind of see why, because the moment that she started talking, her numbers started to drop, which again was somewhat of an issue in the primary the first time around. So Simone, I agree with you. I'm sorry, Egg, I agree with you. Let's see who's next. Did that one, this one. Never underestimate people voting for Trump out of spite. I did it on the second Bernie supporter. A lot of Bernie supporters did. They were very angry. I mean, for one, you're backing a genocide. Two, you're trying to convince me that the genocide is not that bad, which means you're pissing me off because you're downplaying the genocide. Three, your administration has paid 70% of all of the death, killing, and everything else. Four, you cheated my guy. And I've said before, if you cheat my guy, I'm going to hate you forever. You have ruined the political process in this thing. Meaning, I received a magnificent lesson from the DNC when Sanders ran the first time around. In the old days, the Democrats will go with this argument that we're in this together. When I'm stronger, you support me, and when you're stronger, I'll support you. And both of us are in the same party, and this is how this works. Okay. Sanders becomes the strongest candidate, and they put a knife in him. They do any and everything in their power to stop Sanders. Hillary Clinton games the system. And then even in the other race with Joe Biden, all of these people jump out. Warren stays in and attacks Sanders, the person who's ideally, supposedly, ideologically closer to her. What it taught me, we weren't in this together. When you get Chris Matthews saying we would prefer Trump win it as opposed to giving it over to Sanders because Sanders would take the party for a generation. Okay, well, we're not in it together. You've conned me over all of those years by giving me this impression that we're in it together. So I support you. But when the tables turn and you're no longer in a stronger position, you in no way are going to support my priorities or my policy interests. Thank you for the lesson. You cheat my guy, I'm going to hate you forever. Agreed. I'm not turning around and voting for Trump. I don't want that on my conscience, but agree with you. The Well-Dressed Nerd, Braves review. The show audio is good, but clip audio is super low. Still? Brave, I'll try to fix that. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't hear it as super low. I hear it as louder, but I'll try to fix it. Kamala was doomed when unions didn't endorse her. It didn't help her. It didn't help her. The only way for Democrats to win would be to have Sanders or someone like him as a nominee for 2028, Naren Levy. Sanders will be like 1,000 years old at that point. He will be like 1,000 years old. Fit, yes. Spry, probably, but like 1,000. He would have some age on him. He would have some age on him. I just said that way. Darren Levy, in 2028, I see Trump backing Gabbard to be a successor, the first female president, Republican taking that away from the Democrats. I suspect it's going to be J.D. Vance if it's going to be anybody. I mean, because that's his VP, right? That's the person he's grooming in some way. And to be honest, from standpoint of foreign policy, some of the things that J.D. Vance has articulated kind of falls in line with Trump more than, many of the other people. He may bring Gabbard into his administration, but I don't see her as first VP, but I could be wrong. All right, guys, we have come to the end. I will listen to this video to listen for the clips, Brave. I thought they were much louder this time around. At the very least, I'm hearing them louder. It may be something in the system where they're being translated in a way that's not loud enough. I will try to find a way around it. That's my bad. Look, guys, if you dig the content, like it, share it, subscribe to it, hit the notification bell, do all of that stuff. On top of that, if you really dig the content, consider liking, sharing, subscribing. I think I just said that. I must be getting tired. Also consider donating either through PayPal, Patreon, or for that matter, Super Chats. All of them will be read, provided you're not sexist, racist, or bigoted. I am dragging ass, so I am going to call it a day. You guys have a phenomenal day. You probably will see me pop it in and out at some point. Have a good one, all. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 14. Signing off.